Tonight you will discover a gentle secret, a timeless art that Buddhist masters have used for centuries to find profound peace in a noisy world. I am about to share a collection of remarkable Zen tales, each one a quiet key designed to unlock your mind's natural ability to release worry and find deep healing rest. And what makes these teachings so powerful is that they work without your effort. You don't need to try to relax. You don't need to fight your thoughts or have any experience with meditation. A great Zen master once said, "When the mind is still, the universe surrenders." In the hours to come, you will feel the truth of these words unfold within you. As we journey through these stories of wise gardeners, silent masters, and unexpected awakenings, you may notice a gentle shift. The weight on your shoulders may feel lighter. The rhythm of your breathing may deepen naturally, and the space between your thoughts may begin to widen, inviting a tranquility you may not have felt in a long time. So allow yourself to settle in now. Let the full weight of your body be held by the surface beneath you. Release the tension in your jaw, your shoulders, your hands. Let's take one slow conscious breath together now, breathing in calm. And as you breathe out, let go of the entire day. You have done enough. You are in the right place. The stories are waiting to meet you. Let us begin. We will begin our journey with a story about our relationship with change and the beauty that is hidden within every ending. This is the tale of the dying cherry tree. In the central courtyard of a mountain monastery stood a magnificent cherry tree, so old that its trunk was gnarled like the hands of a grandfather. For generations, its blossoming in the spring had been the most celebrated event of the year, a breathtaking cloud of pink and white that filled every heart with joy. But this year, the tree was sick. Only a few sparse, sad blossoms appeared on its dying branches. A young monk named Kenji was filled with a deep sorrow. He had grown up with this tree. He saw its decline as a terrible tragedy, a sign that beauty was fleeting and life was cruel. He spent his days in a state of quiet grief, his mind fixated on the loss. His master, a wise old nun named Chio, watched him for many days. One afternoon, she found him sitting under the dying tree, his face a mask of sadness. "The tree is leaving us, master," he said, his voice heavy. "Soon this courtyard will be empty and ugly." Master Chio did not look at the dying branches above. Instead, she knelt down and pointed to the base of the ancient trunk. There, pushing its way up through a crack in the old bark, was a tiny, vibrant green cherry sapling, no taller than her hand. "The tree is not leaving," she said softly. "It is simply changing its clothes. Its life is not ending. It is being passed on. You have been so busy mourning the beauty that is passing. You have failed to see the beauty that is being born." This gentle lesson reveals one of the deepest truths of our existence, the law of impermanence. Like Kenji, we often cling to the forms we know and love, and we experience great suffering when they change or pass away. We see endings as tragedies, but the Master's wisdom shows us that every ending is also a beginning. Life is not a collection of static things. It is a continuous flowing river of transformation. The energy of the old tree was not being destroyed. It was feeding the new life of the sapling. This understanding invites us to soften our grip on the way things are. Can you look at the endings in your own life? A finished project, a changed relationship, a chapter of your life that is closing with a little more of the Master's vision. Can you see that the energy is not lost, but is simply flowing into a new form, preparing the ground for a beauty you cannot yet see? This same wisdom, which sees the life in death, can also help us understand the nature of our own mind. Just as the tree is a process, not a fixed thing, so too is the self we seek to understand. Let us now explore this in the tale of The Edge of the Mind. A brilliant student named Akemi came to her master, her mind tied in a philosophical knot. "Master," she said, "I have been taught that my true nature is boundless awareness, but my experience is of being a small person, trapped inside this body. I try to find this boundless mind, but I cannot. Where does my mind end and the world begin?" The master led her to a quiet room where a single candle was burning. "Sit," he said, "and for the next hour your only task is to find the edge of this flame." Akemi sat and stared at the candle. At first the task seemed simple. The edge was where the bright yellow flame met the darkness. But as she looked more closely, she saw that it wasn't a sharp line. The flame was a constant dance. Tongues of light would flicker and leap. A soft, hazy aura surrounded the brightest part. The heat extended far beyond the visible light. The light itself reached to the farthest corners of the room. The longer she looked, the more impossible it became to say where the flame truly ended. It was a process, a relationship with the air and the wax, not a self-contained object. When the hour was over, the master returned. "Did you find the edge?" he asked. Akemi looked up, her eyes wide with a new understanding. "No, master, the flame has no edge. It is a dance with everything around it." The master smiled. "Your mind is like that flame," he said. "You have been searching for its edge, for a line where you stop and the world begins. But there is no such line. You are not a separate thing, but a process, a constant flickering dance with the entire universe. Stop trying to find the edge, and you will discover you are boundless." This simple practice reveals our deep-seated illusion of separateness. We feel like a solid, separate self, an I that lives behind our eyes. This feeling is the root of loneliness and fear. The Master's teaching is a direct pointer to the truth of interconnectedness. Just as the flame cannot exist without the air, we cannot exist without the entire universe that supports us. Our awareness is not contained within our skulls. It is a part of a vast shared consciousness. As you rest here, can you feel the air that you are breathing? Where does your breath end and the air in the room begin? In that seamless connection, you can feel the truth that you are not a separate island, but an inseparable part of the living, breathing world. Just as our minds are not separate, our actions, too, create ripples that connect us all. This brings us to a simple story about the true nature of giving, and how a small act can contain a boundless heart. This is the teaching of the baker's gift. In a city lived a wealthy nobleman who was a great patron of the local monastery. Once a month he would arrive with carts laden with bags of the finest rice, expensive silks, and gold coins. He would make his offering with great ceremony, and the monks would praise his generosity. He felt very proud and spiritual. In the same city lived a poor baker, an old woman who barely had enough to feed herself. Every morning she would bake 2 extra loaves of simple, coarse bread. She would place one on her windowsill for any hungry person who passed by. The other she would carry to the monastery. She would not enter with a grand gesture, but would simply leave the still warm loaf on the temple steps before the sun had fully risen, and then disappear. One day, the nobleman complained to the abbot. "I give this monastery so much," he said, "but the baker gives only a single loaf of poor bread. Surely my merit is 1,000 times greater than hers." The abbot, a wise man, replied, "It is true that you give 1,000 times more, but you give from your surplus, and your heart is full of pride in the giving. The baker gives when she is almost nothing. She gives the bread that could be her own meal. She expects no thanks and no recognition. You give a portion of your wealth. She gives a portion of her life. Her one loaf, therefore, fills the entire universe with its merit, while your many carts fill only this courtyard." This story gently adjusts our understanding of generosity. We often measure giving by its quantity, but the abbot's wisdom shows that the true measure is the quality of the heart. The nobleman's giving was a transaction. He gave wealth to receive status and a feeling of importance. The baker's giving was a pure offering, an expression of unconditional compassion. This teaching is not just about material things. It applies to our time, our energy, and our attention. We can give an hour of our time to someone while our mind is elsewhere, full of our own concerns, or we can give 5 minutes of our full, heartfelt, and undivided attention, which is the greater gift. The story invites us to look at our own acts of giving. Are we giving freely, from a place of genuine care, or are we secretly hoping to get something in return? Gratitude, love, or a good feeling about ourselves? The lesson of the baker is that even the smallest gift, when given with a whole and selfless heart, is a treasure beyond measure. This question of a pure heart, free from the burdens of the past, leads us to a story about how we can find clarity even when our minds feel clouded by old mistakes. This is the tale of the muddy water. A young man came to a monastery, his heart heavy with regret. Years ago, he had made a terrible mistake that had hurt someone he loved, and he could not forgive himself. The memory haunted him, coloring his every thought and feeling. "Master," he said, his voice choked with shame, "my mind is full of mud. I am stained by my past. How can I ever find clarity?" The master led him to a quiet room. He took a clear glass jar and filled it with pure water from the well. Then he took a handful of dirt and stirred it into the jar. The water instantly became a murky, opaque brown. "This," the master said, "is your mind right now. It is filled with the mud of your past." The young man nodded sadly. "Now," the master continued, "tell me, what would you do to make this water clear?" "I would try to scoop the mud out," the man said. "Or maybe I could try to filter it, to strain the dirt away." "Try," the master said. But every attempt the man made to remove the mud only stirred the water up more, making it even murkier. Finally, he gave up. "It is useless," he said in despair. "No," the master said gently. "There is another way." He placed the jar on a windowsill in the sunlight. "Now, we will just leave it alone." They sat together in silence for a long time. The young man watched the jar, and slowly, ever so slowly, the particles of mud began to settle. After an hour, the mud had formed a layer at the bottom of the jar, and the water above it was perfectly clear and brilliant in the sun. "You see," the master said, "you do not have to fight with the mud. You cannot force clarity. You simply have to create the conditions for stillness, and the mud will settle all by itself. Your clarity is always there, underneath. Be still and let it return." This story is a beautiful metaphor for working with a troubled mind. When we are caught in painful memories, regret, or anxiety, our first instinct is to fight. We try to push the thoughts away, analyze them, or argue with them. But as the story shows, this mental struggle often just stirs up more mud. The master's wisdom points to the power of non-resistance and gentle acceptance. The practice of meditation is the practice of creating that inner stillness. It is the act of simply letting the jar of the mind be, without stirring it. We don't have to get rid of our painful thoughts or memories. We can simply allow them to be, and with time and stillness, they will naturally lose their power to cloud our awareness. The mud will settle, and our inherent clarity will reveal itself once more. This gentle allowing, rather than forceful doing, is a secret to peace that is often forgotten. Our next story explores this same theme in a different way, through the eyes of a man who tried to command nature itself. This is the lesson of the impatient gardener. A wealthy man who was new to the art of gardening, bought a piece of land, and was determined to create the most beautiful garden in the province. He was an impatient man, used to getting what he wanted immediately. He planted hundreds of exotic flower bulbs, and then he waited. but they did not sprout fast enough for his liking. "These plants are lazy," he declared, so he went out every morning and dug up a few bulbs to see if they were growing roots. He would pull on the first tiny green shoots, trying to help them grow faster. He would overwater them, believing more water would speed up their growth. He commanded them to bloom, but his garden remained a patch of disturbed earth and wilting shoots. His neighbor was a simple Zen monk who tended a small, humble garden next door. The monk's garden was a riot of color and life. The impatient man, seeing this, went to the monk in frustration. "What is your secret?" he demanded. "I give my plants everything. I work so hard, but they die. You seem to do nothing, and your garden thrives." The monk smiled. "You do not love your plants," he said. "You love your idea of what your plants should be. Your work is not care, it is control. You do not give the seeds the one thing they truly need, the quiet, patient space in which to grow in their own time. My only secret is that I trust the garden. I provide the soil and the water, and then I get out of the way. The growing is their business, not mine." This story is a simple lesson in the Taoist and Zen principle of Wu Wei, or effortless action. The impatient gardener represents our ego mind, which is always trying to control life, to force outcomes, and to speed up natural processes. We do this in our relationships, in our careers, and even in our spiritual practice. We want peace now, we want love now, we want success now. This constant pushing and pulling creates immense stress, and often, like the gardener, we end up destroying the very things we are trying to cultivate. The monk's wisdom is in his trust. He understands that there is a natural intelligence in life, a rhythm and a timing that cannot be forced. True skill lies not in imposing our will, but in creating the right conditions and then allowing life to unfold. This is not about being passive. The monk still waters and weeds, but his action is one of cooperation, not domination. As you lie here, can you feel the places in your own life where you are pulling on the shoots? Can you feel the gentle relief that comes with simply trusting the process and giving your own inner garden the quiet, patient space it needs to bloom in its own perfect time? This same wisdom, which trusts the natural unfolding of things, can also be found not in grand ideas, but in the simplest of our own bodily experiences. This brings us to a tale about an intellectual who found truth not in his head, but in his feet. This is the story of the answer in the footsteps. Hall. This is the story of the answer in the footsteps. A monk named Gencho was renowned for his brilliant intellect. He had spent 20 years studying a single complex koan, a Zen riddle designed to break down the logical mind. The koan was, "What is the sound of one hand clapping?" Gencho had written pages of philosophical analysis about it. He had meditated on it until his head ached. He had offered his master dozens of clever intellectual answers, but the master had rejected every single one. Gencho grew desperate. He felt he had exhausted the limits of his powerful mind. One rainy afternoon, his master saw his despair. "Gencho," he said, "put away your books. Today your only practice is to walk to the village and bring back a bag of rice. But you must do it with one instruction: feel every single step." Gencho thought the task was pointless, but he obeyed. He set out on the muddy path. He tried to think about his feet, to analyze the sensation of walking, but the master's instruction was simpler than that, so he let go. He just felt. He felt the soft mud squish between his toes. He felt the cold shock of a puddle. He felt the solid, reassuring pressure of a flat stone. He felt the rhythm of his own body, the gentle swing of his arms. His entire world, which had been trapped in the noisy, narrow space of his head, dropped down into the simple, silent, and profound reality of his own 2 feet. He was not thinking about walking. He was just walking. When he returned to the monastery, his face was radiant. He bowed to his master and said nothing. The master smiled. "Ah," he said, "so you have heard it." Gensho had finally heard the sound of one hand, the simple, undivided, non-conceptual sound of reality itself, a truth that could only be found when he got out of his head and into his life. This story reveals the limitations of the intellect on the spiritual path. Like Gensho, we often believe that we can think our way to peace. We analyze our problems, we read self-help books, we try to construct a flawless mental understanding of how to be happy. But wisdom is not an idea, it is an embodied experience. The master's instruction to feel every single step was an invitation to move from the head to the body, from thinking to being. Our bodies are always in the present moment. Our feet can only walk right here, right now. By anchoring our awareness in the physical sensations of the body, we can find a direct doorway out of the endless maze of our thoughts. As you lie here, can you feel the simple sensations in your own body? The gentle pressure where you are touching the bed, the feeling of the air on your skin, the subtle rhythm of your own breathing. This is not a concept. This is real. This is the simple, silent answer to all our complicated questions. And just as reality is more profound than our thoughts about it, we must also be careful not to mistake our reflections on the world for the world itself. This brings us to a quiet teaching by a moonlit pond, the story of the ripples in the pond. A young student and her master were sitting by a small, perfectly still pond one evening. The full moon was reflected on the surface of the water, a flawless silver disk. "Master," the student said, "my mind is finally like this pond. It is still, and it reflects the truth perfectly. I have achieved clarity." The master said nothing. He simply reached down, picked up a tiny pebble, and gently tossed it into the center of the pond. The perfect reflection of the moon instantly shattered into 1,000 shimmering, dancing fragments of light. A web of ripples spread out, distorting the entire surface. The student gasped in dismay. "Master, why did you do that?" "You have ruined my perfect stillness." "I have ruined nothing," the master replied softly. "I have simply shown you the nature of things. Your mind, like this pond, will always be touched by the pebbles of the world, a thought, a feeling, a sound, a word from another person. These are the ripples of life. You are attached to the image of a perfectly still mind, a mind with no ripples. That is a state of death, not of life. True clarity is not the absence of ripples. It is the wisdom to know that you are not the ripples, but the deep, quiet water that allows the ripples to come and go, always returning to stillness on its own. This story is a crucial teaching for anyone who practices meditation or seeks peace. We often develop a subtle attachment to stillness itself. We have a good meditation when our mind is quiet and a bad one when it is busy. We think the goal is to get rid of all the ripples, but the Master shows us that this is a misunderstanding. Life is a constant flow of experiences, and our minds will naturally respond with ripples of thought and emotion. To try and stop this is to fight against life itself. The real practice is to change our identification. We learn to rest as the deep, silent water, not the fleeting ripples on the surface. We cultivate an awareness that can witness the thoughts, the emotions, the disturbances without being swept away by them. When we do this, we find a peace that is not fragile or conditional. It is a peace that can hold both the stillness and the storm, knowing that underneath it all, the deep water of our true nature is always calm and undisturbed. This ability to hold all of life with a calm and open heart is the essence of compassion. Our next story explores how this compassion can extend even to those who seem frightening or dangerous. This is the tale of the wounded hawk. In a Zen monastery, there was a monk named Ryokan who was known for his boundless and sometimes eccentric compassion. One day, a large hawk, a fierce bird of prey, fell into the monastery's courtyard, its wing broken. The other monks were afraid of it. They saw it as a violent killer, a creature of death. They wanted to drive it away or leave it to its fate. But Ryokan went to the hawk without fear. He saw not a killer, but a being in terrible pain and fear. The hawk, terrified, tried to strike at him with its sharp beak and talons. But Ryokan did not recoil. He simply sat near the bird, radiating a feeling of calm and safety. He sat there for the entire day. Slowly the hawk's aggression subsided. That evening, Ryokan was able to gently splint its wing and offer it a little water. For many weeks, Ryokan cared for the hawk. He shared his own food with it, and he would sit with it for hours, chanting sutras in a soft voice. The other monks thought he was a fool, wasting his time on a savage beast. But slowly, a trust began to form between the man and the bird. The day the wing was healed, Ryokan took the hawk to the top of a hill. He gently untied its splint. The great bird stretched its magnificent wings, looked at Ryokan for a long moment, and then leaped into the sky. It circled once, high above the monk's head, in what seemed like a gesture of farewell, and then soared away toward the mountains. The other monks, who had watched from a distance, finally understood. Ryokan's compassion did not see categories like good or bad, friend or enemy. It only saw life, and it responded with love. This story teaches us that true compassion is boundless. Our ordinary minds are constantly creating labels and judgments. We divide the world into things we like and things we don't, people we trust and people we fear. These labels create a barrier between our hearts and the world. Ryokan's heart had no such barriers. He was able to see past the hawk's fearsome reputation and connect directly with its suffering. This is the practice of what Buddhism calls metta, or loving kindness. It is the cultivation of a heart that wishes well for all beings, without exception. It is the recognition that even in those who act with aggression or anger, there is a deep underlying suffering. The story is an invitation to look at the wounded hawks in our own lives, the difficult people, the ones who trigger our fear or judgment. Can we, just for a moment, look past their threatening exterior and see the frightened, wounded being within? This does not mean we have to be foolish or put ourselves in harm's way, but it is a shift in perspective that can soften our own hearts and open the door to a more peaceful and compassionate way of being in the world. This same ability to see beyond the surface, to find the sacred in the most unexpected places, is the theme of our next story. It is a tale that asks, what is the most valuable thing in the world? This is the temple's true treasure. A wealthy pilgrim traveled to a famous Zen temple, which was said to house a priceless treasure, a sacred relic of the Buddha himself. The pilgrim had brought a magnificent offering, a large, perfect crystal, which he planned to trade for a single glimpse of this holy object. He found the abbot, an old man with a simple, kind face. "I have come to see the temple's treasure," the pilgrim announced, placing his own crystal on the table. "This is my offering." The abbot looked at the beautiful crystal, and then at the pilgrim's eager face. "You have come a long way," he said. "You must be hungry after your journey. Let us eat first." He led the pilgrim not to a grand hall, but to the simple monastery kitchen. He took 2 plain wooden bowls from a shelf and filled them with simple steaming white rice. He handed one to the pilgrim. "This is the temple's true treasure," the abbot said simply. The pilgrim was confused and angry. This is just common rice. I have come to see the holy relic of the Buddha. Do not mock me." The abbot smiled. "What is a relic?" he asked. "It is something that reminds us of the Buddha's teaching, and the greatest teaching is to be found right here, right now, in this very moment. This rice is a treasure because it is the gift of the whole earth. It holds the sun, the rain, and the soil. It is the work of countless farmers. It is the food that will sustain your life for this afternoon. If you can be fully present for this one bowl of rice, if you can taste it with your whole being, then you are touching the same reality the Buddha touched. What could be more holy than that? The pilgrim looked down at the simple bowl in his hands, and for the first time he truly saw it. And he understood that he had been searching for a treasure in a far-off box, when the real treasure had been offered to him in his own two hands. This story gently guides us back to the heart of Zen practice, the discovery of the sacred in the ordinary. We often think of spirituality as something separate from our daily lives, something found in special places, special objects, or special states of mind. We chase after peak experiences while overlooking the quiet miracle of our ordinary existence. The abbot's lesson is that there is no separation. The ultimate reality is not hiding. It is right here in the most simple, humble, and overlooked details of our lives. A bowl of rice, a cup of tea, the feeling of our own breath. These are not obstacles on the path to enlightenment. They are the path itself. The story invites you to consider where you might be looking for your treasure. Are you waiting for some future moment of perfect peace? Are you seeking some grand spiritual experience? The wisdom of the temple is that you don't have to wait or seek. The treasure is already here. It is in the simple, miraculous fact of your own aliveness, right now. As you rest, perhaps you can feel the simple treasure of your own body, breathing quietly in the dark. There is nothing more sacred than this. That simple bowl of rice, a treasure found not in a locked vault but in the palm of one's own hand, reminds us that the greatest truths are often the most humble. This same wisdom, which finds the sacred in the simple, can also teach us about the nature of our own strength. This brings us to a story about a man who believed power was found in fame, only to discover it in anonymity. This is the tale of the governor's hidden teacher. A powerful provincial governor named Kenji was a man of great pride. He was a skilled swordsman, a respected scholar, and a devout student of Zen. He believed his worldly success was a sign of his deep spiritual understanding. One day he heard of a Zen master living in his province who was said to be a living Buddha, but who lived in complete obscurity. The governor, wanting to test this so-called master, went to visit him. He found the master, an old man named Ryudo, living in a tiny hut and tending a small vegetable patch. The governor, in his fine silk robes, announced his presence with great authority. "I am Governor Kenji," he said. "I have come to see if your wisdom is as great as the legends claim." Ryudo bowed and simply said, "Welcome. The weeds in my garden are also very great. Would you care to help me pull some?" For an entire afternoon, the governor, the most powerful man in the province, worked on his hands and knees in the dirt beside the old man. They did not speak of the Dharma. They spoke of the rain and the taste of cucumbers and the stubbornness of certain roots. The governor, at first annoyed, slowly found his mind growing quiet, his pride softening in the simple, honest work. As the sun began to set, the governor stood up, his robes stained with earth. "Old man," he said, a new humility in his voice, "I came here to test you, but in your silence you have shown me the poverty of my own pride. People say you are a living Buddha, yet you live as a nobody. Why do you hide your greatness?" Ryudo smiled and pointed to the vegetables in their basket. "A carrot does not announce its sweetness," he said. "It is just sweet. Does the sun need to proclaim its own light? It just shines. True greatness does not need to be seen. It is content simply to be." This encounter is a profound teaching on the nature of the ego and true spiritual maturity. The governor, like many of us, confused his external identity, his titles, his skills, his reputation, with his true self. He believed that spiritual worth was something to be demonstrated and recognized. Master Ryudo, on the other hand, embodies the wisdom of anonymity. He had no need for a reputation because he had no ego to defend or promote. His greatness was not in what he projected, but in the simple, authentic quality of his being. The story gently invites us to look at our own need for recognition. How much of our energy is spent cultivating an image, seeking validation, and wanting to be seen as special in some way? The carrot's quiet sweetness is a reminder that our true worth is not in the noise we make, but in the simple, authentic quality we bring to each moment, whether anyone is watching or not. Just as the governor learned the value of humility, another proud man once learned that some things cannot be controlled, only received. This brings us to a lesson about the nature of inspiration and the futility of trying to command the human heart. This is the story of the emperor and the poet. The emperor of China was a man of immense power, but he had one frustration: he could not command beauty. He summoned the greatest poet in the empire, a woman named Li. "I wish to have a poem written about the moon," the emperor declared. "It must be the most beautiful poem ever written. I will give you a room in the palace, the finest inks and silks, and anything you desire, but the poem must be ready by tomorrow's dawn." Li bowed. She was given a luxurious room with a wide balcony that looked out over the royal gardens. She sat at a polished desk, her blank silk scroll before her. She tried to write. She thought about the moon, its symbolism, its history and poetry. She tried clever rhymes and elegant metaphors, but her mind was a desert. The pressure of the emperor's command had silenced her heart. The words that came were skillful but empty, like beautiful shells with no life inside. The night wore on, and her scroll remained blank. Just before dawn, in a state of quiet despair, she gave up. She pushed the desk away, walked out onto the balcony, and simply looked at the moon as it began to fade into the morning sky. She did not try to write a poem about it. She just watched it. She felt its cool, silent light on her face. A feeling of deep, selfless wonder filled her. And then, without any effort, a single, simple line of poetry arose in her heart. She went back inside, and in a few moments the poem wrote itself, flowing from her brush without thought or hesitation. When she presented it to the emperor, he read it and was moved to tears. "It is a masterpiece," he whispered. "How did you do it?" Li replied. "Your Majesty, I did not write the poem. I simply got out of the way so that the moon could write it through me." This story is a beautiful teaching on the nature of creativity, inspiration, and even spiritual insight. The emperor represents our ego mind, which believes that anything can be achieved through force of will and command. But the poet's experience shows that the deepest qualities of the heart, love, beauty, wisdom, cannot be forced. They can only be invited. Li's struggle is familiar to anyone who has tried to force an outcome. The more she tried, the more blocked she became. Her breakthrough came in the moment of surrender, when she stopped trying to do and simply learned to be present with the moon. The very beauty she was trying to capture was able to flow through her. This is a profound lesson for our own lives. We often try to force ourselves to be happy, to be loving, to be peaceful. But these are not states we can achieve through willpower. They are the natural qualities of a heart that has become quiet and receptive. As you rest, can you feel what it is like to simply get out of the way, to let go of the striving and the commanding, and to create a quiet space where the simple, natural beauty of your own being can emerge, all on its own? This same gentle surrender, this getting out of the way, is also the key to navigating the inevitable difficulties of life. This brings us to a quiet story about two different ways of meeting a storm, the tale of the cave and the reeds. Two monks were on a pilgrimage when they were caught in a violent, unseasonable blizzard high in the mountains. One monk named Juro was a man of great discipline and willpower. "We must find a cave," he shouted over the wind. "We must find shelter and resist this storm." They found a shallow cave, and Juro huddled in the back, his body rigid, shivering and miserable, fighting the cold, cursing the wind, waiting for the storm to end. The other monk, Kenshin, did not go into the cave. Instead, he went to a place where a thick patch of reeds grew by a frozen stream. The reeds were thin and fragile, and the wind and snow whipped through them mercilessly. But they did not break. They simply bent with the force of the wind, yielding completely, their pliability, their strength. Kenshin sat among them, and he did as they did. He did not resist the cold. He allowed himself to feel it fully, letting his body relax into it. He did not fight the wind. He swayed with it. He became one with the reeds, one with the storm. When the storm passed, Juro emerged from his cave, exhausted and frozen from his long battle. He found Kenshin sitting peacefully, covered in a light dusting of snow, a serene smile on his face. "How did you survive out here?" Juro asked in disbelief. "I nearly froze in the cave," Kenshin replied. "You tried to fight the storm, so it became your enemy. I decided to dance with it, so it became my teacher. It taught me that there is a strength in yielding that resistance can never know." This story is a powerful metaphor for how we meet the blizzards of our own lives, the periods of intense difficulty, pain, or emotional turmoil. Our instinct, like Juro's, is often to resist. We tense up, we fight against the feeling, we retreat into our mental caves and hope it will pass. This resistance is what creates most of our suffering. It is a battle we can never win. Kenshin demonstrates the wisdom of non-resistance. This is not weakness. It is a profound and active form of engagement. He did not deny the storm. He allowed himself to feel it completely, without the secondary layer of mental struggle. By yielding, he preserved his energy and found a deep peace right in the heart of the storm. This teaching invites us to look at the difficulties we are facing. Where are we tensing up, fighting, resisting? What would it feel like to soften just a little, to allow the feeling to be here without needing it to go away, to, in a sense, learn to dance with it? In that gentle yielding, we can discover a resilience and a peace that have been here all along, waiting beneath our struggle. This gentle yielding to the reality of the moment is also the foundation of true compassion, not only for others, but for ourselves. Let us now explore this in a tale about a man who was taught the most important lesson by the creature he sought to control. This is the story of the horse trainer's secret. A young horse trainer was given a wild, spirited stallion that no one else had been able to tame. The trainer used all the conventional methods: force, discipline, and dominance. He would fight the horse's will, trying to break its spirit. But the more he fought, the more wild and rebellious the horse became. Exhausted and defeated, he went to an old Zen master who was known to have a strange and gentle way with animals. "Master, how do I tame this horse?" he asked. The master said, "You must learn the language of the horse. Go and live in the field with it. Do not try to train it. Just be with it." The trainer did as he was told. For a month he lived in the pasture. He ate when the horse ate. He rested when the horse rested. He stood in the rain when the horse stood in the rain. He stopped seeing the horse as an object to be controlled and began to feel its nature, its fear, its pride, its playfulness. One day, the horse, which had always kept its distance, walked over and gently nudged the trainer's shoulder with its nose. In that moment, the trainer understood. The horse had not needed a master to break its will. It had needed a friend to understand its heart. From that day on, their training was a partnership, a dance of mutual trust, and the stallion became the most loyal and magnificent horse in the kingdom. This story is a parable for how we treat the wild horse of our own mind and emotions. We often have parts of ourselves that feel untamable: our anger, our fear, our sadness. Our usual approach is to try and break them, to control them with force and self-judgment. We fight against our own feelings, which only makes them stronger and more rebellious. The Master's wisdom is to live in the field with these wild parts of ourselves. This means turning toward our feelings with curiosity and kindness, rather than with aggression. It means learning their language, understanding their needs. Your anxiety is not your enemy. It is a part of you that is trying to protect you. Your sadness is not a flaw. It is a part of you that is grieving a loss. When we can approach our own inner world with this kind of friendship, a profound healing begins to happen. We stop fighting with ourselves, and a natural harmony emerges. Just as the horse trainer learned a new way of relating, another monk once learned that the greatest teachings often come when we have nothing left to prove. This brings us to a quiet story of deep winter and the wisdom found in emptiness. This is the tale of the silent snow. A young monk had spent the entire autumn in a solitary mountain hut, studying a complex Buddhist text on the nature of emptiness. He had filled his mind with words and concepts, but his heart felt no closer to the truth. Now deep winter had come, and he was completely snowed in, his small hut a tiny island in a vast white ocean of silence. His food was running out, and a feeling of deep despair began to settle over him. His years of study felt useless against the raw power of the winter. One morning he awoke to find that his inkstone had frozen solid, and his last brush was stiff with ice. He could no longer read or write. He could no longer study the Dharma. All his tools of the intellect had been taken from him. He had nothing left to do. He simply sat by his small window and looked out at the falling snow. He watched each individual snowflake as it drifted down, silent and unique. He watched as they landed and became one with the great seamless blanket of white. He watched for hours, his mind for the first time as empty and as silent as the landscape outside. There were no concepts, no theories, just the simple, profound and silent reality of the snow. And in that great emptiness, he found not despair but a peace so deep it felt like the heart of the world. He realized the books had only ever been a description of the snow. This was the snow itself. This story is a beautiful illustration of the limits of conceptual knowledge. We can spend our whole lives reading about the spiritual path, accumulating information and ideas, but there comes a point where we must put down the books and directly experience the truth for ourselves. The snowstorm, which at first seemed like a disaster, was actually a great gift to the monk. It created a forced retreat from his thinking mind. It took away his ability to do his practice and left him with nothing but the practice of being. It is often in these moments when our usual strategies fail, when we feel we have nothing left, that the greatest breakthroughs can occur. The emptiness the monk had been studying was no longer a philosophical concept, it was a living reality. He discovered that emptiness is not a void, but a vast, peaceful potential out of which everything is born. This same potential, which the monk found in the silence of the snow, can also be found in the most humble of our daily actions. This brings us to a story about a man who believed his worth was in what he built, only to discover it was in what he was. This is the story of the bridge builder's dream. A man named Kaito dedicated his entire life to building bridges. He was a master craftsman, and his bridges were renowned for their strength and beauty. He worked from dawn until dusk, driven by a deep need to leave a lasting legacy. He believed that his worth as a person was measured by the number and quality of the bridges he built. He was so focused on his work, he rarely had time for his family or for simply enjoying the beauty of the world. One night, he had a dream. He dreamt that he died and arrived at the gates of the Pure Land. He was met by the Buddha. Kaito bowed low and said, "I am Kaito, the bridge builder. I have built 100 bridges that connect villages and cross great rivers. I have dedicated my entire life to my work. Surely I have earned a place here." The Buddha looked at him with infinite compassion. "The bridges you built with wood and stone were indeed beautiful," the Buddha said. "But tell me, Kaito, while you were so busy building bridges for others to cross, did you ever build a bridge to your own heart? Did you build a bridge of kindness to your wife? Did you build a bridge of presence to your children? Did you build a bridge of stillness to the quiet river of your own soul?" Kaito stood in silence, and for the first time he saw the truth. He had been a master of outer construction, but a complete novice at inner construction. He had connected the world, but he had remained disconnected from himself. He woke from the dream in a cold sweat. He went to the window and saw the sun rising, and it was as if he were seeing it for the first time. He did not go to his workshop that day. He went and sat with his wife and simply held her hand. This story is a poignant reminder of where true value lies. We live in a world that celebrates external achievement. We are encouraged to build bridges, to create successful careers, to accumulate wealth, to leave a mark on the world. These things are not inherently wrong, but the story shows the danger of losing ourselves in them. Kaito's dream was a profound wake-up call. It taught him that the most important bridges we will ever build are not the ones of wood and stone, but the ones of love, kindness and presence that connect us to our own hearts and to the people around us. What is the use of connecting the whole world if we are strangers to ourselves? The story invites us to pause in our own busy lives of doing and to ask, what are the inner bridges that need my attention today? How can I connect more deeply with the quiet presence of my own being and with the simple, sacred presence of those I love? This question of connection brings us to a famous story that explores the very nature of what it means to be a teacher and a student, a tale that playfully dissolves the line between giving and receiving. This is the story of the master's empty hands. A young student came to a great Zen master. He bowed and said, "Master, I have come to you with nothing. I am empty. I have no special talents, no deep knowledge, and no gifts to offer. Please, will you teach me?" The master looked at him and smiled. "You are mistaken," he said. "You have brought me a wonderful gift." The student was confused. "But my hands are empty," he protested. "Exactly," the master replied. "You have brought me the gift of your empty hands. A student who comes with full hands, full of ideas and pride, has no room to receive anything. But you have brought me the greatest gift of all, the willingness to be taught. Now put that gift down." The student, even more confused, looked at his empty hands. "But master, how can I put down nothing?" "Ah," the master's eyes twinkled. "Now your real training begins." This short, paradoxical exchange is the essence of Zen. The student believes his emptiness is a lack, a problem. The master reveals that this very emptiness is the greatest treasure, the prerequisite for any real learning. Our minds are often so full of our opinions, our past experiences, our sense of who we are, that we are not truly open to the present moment. We are like a full cup, nothing more can be poured in. To be empty-handed is to arrive with a beginner's mind, a mind that is humble, open, and receptive. But then the master adds the final, brilliant twist. Put that gift down. He is pointing to a deeper truth. Even our identity as an empty student who needs to be taught is another concept to be released. To be truly free is to let go of even the idea of ourselves as a seeker. It is to stop defining ourselves as either full or empty, and to simply be present. The story is a playful invitation to let go of all our self-definitions, even the spiritual ones. As you rest here, can you feel the peace that comes from not needing to be anyone? Not a good meditator, not a spiritual person, just this simple, open, and indefinable presence. This same presence, which is beyond all our definitions, is also the source of our deepest strength. The strength found not in aggression, but in a quiet and unshakable center. This brings us to a tale from the world of the samurai and the lesson of the unbeatable mind. A young warrior, who was already a skilled swordsman, came to an old Zen master, who was also a legendary fencing teacher. "Master," he said, "I have learned all the techniques. My reflexes are like lightning, but I know there is a final level I have not reached. What is the secret to being truly unbeatable?" The master did not answer with words. He invited the young warrior to a match. They stood facing each other with wooden swords. The young warrior was a blur of motion, his attacks swift and aggressive, but the old master did not seem to be fighting at all. He simply moved, flowing like water around the young man's attacks. He was not trying to win. He was not even trying to defend. His mind was as calm and as empty as a clear blue sky. The young warrior, for all his speed and aggression, could not touch him. He became more and more frustrated, his attacks growing wilder, his energy draining away. Finally, he overextended himself and stumbled, falling to the ground. Exhausted, the old master stood over him, his wooden sword resting lightly on the young man's chest. "You are trying to conquer your opponent," the master said calmly. "That is why you can be defeated. The secret to being unbeatable is to first conquer the desire to win that lives within your own mind. When your mind is still and empty, when there is no thought of winning or losing, of self or other, then you can respond perfectly to whatever comes. You become like a mirror, reflecting every movement without being disturbed by it. How can you defeat a mirror? This story reveals the heart of Zen practice applied to action. We often think that strength lies in aggression, in willpower, in the desire to overcome. But the master shows a deeper strength, the strength of what is called mushin, or no mind. This is not an empty mind in the sense of being blank, but a mind that is not fixed or occupied by thought and emotion. It is fluid, responsive, and totally present. The young warrior's mind was full of the desire to win, which made him predictable and rigid. The master's mind was empty, which made him unpredictable and free. This teaching applies to all the battles of our lives: a difficult negotiation, a challenging conversation, or an internal struggle with a bad habit. When we enter these situations with a desperate need to win, we create tension and resistance. But when we can enter with a calm, open, and receptive mind, we can respond to the situation with greater wisdom, clarity, and effectiveness. This ability to find freedom beyond our own desires brings us to a quiet tale for this part of our journey. It is a story about the nature of our deepest longing and the surprising place where it is finally met. This is the story of the river that reached the sea. A small river was born high in the mountains. Its one great purpose, its deepest longing, was to reach the sea. At first its journey was easy, tumbling joyfully down the mountainside. But then it reached the great flat desert. It tried to cross, but the hot sun and the thirsty sand drank it up. It would flow for a few miles and then disappear. It tried again and again, pushing with all its might, but it could not cross. It grew desperate and weary. It seemed its great purpose would never be fulfilled. One day a voice whispered to it from the desert wind, "The wind can cross the desert, and so can you. But I am not the wind," the river cried. "I am water. I will be absorbed." "You must let the wind carry you," the voice whispered back. "You must allow yourself to be absorbed. You must be willing to lose the form you have now, to rise as vapor, and to be carried to your destination." The river was terrified. To let go of its form, to no longer be a river, seemed like death. But its longing to reach the sea was greater than its fear, and so it surrendered. It stopped trying to push through the sand, and it allowed the warm sun to draw it up into the sky. It became a vast, invisible cloud of vapor, and the wind carried it effortlessly over the desert. And on the other side, it cooled and condensed, and fell as rain, and the rain gathered, and became a great, powerful river once more. And it flowed the last few miles with a deep, joyful knowing, until finally it merged with the vast, welcoming expanse of the sea. This beautiful Sufi parable, often told in Zen, is a story of our own spiritual journey. We all have a deep instinctual longing to return to our source, to merge with the ocean of peace or God or ultimate reality. The river represents our individual ego, our sense of a separate self. The desert represents the challenges of life, the places where our own effort and willpower are not enough. The river's great lesson is that it cannot reach the ocean by trying to remain a separate river. It must surrender its form. It must have the courage to let go of its familiar identity. This is often the most frightening part of the spiritual path. We are afraid that if we let go of our ego, our story, our familiar self, we will disappear. But the story promises that this death is actually a transformation. In letting go of our limited, separate self, we are carried to a vaster reality. We do not disappear. We expand. We discover that we were never just the small, struggling river, but a part of the great, universal cycle of water, sky, and sea. It is a story of ultimate trust, the trust to let go of who we think we are in order to discover who we truly are. That courageous surrender, the river letting go of its form to finally reach the sea, teaches us that our greatest strength is often found not in holding on, but in release. This same wisdom is sometimes found not in those who strive for greatness, but in those who have never been burdened by the need to be clever. This brings us to the story of the wise fool. In a small village there lived a man named Koji, who was considered by all to be a simpleton. He was a man of few words and even fewer complex thoughts. He would spend his days sitting by the river, smiling at the water, or watching the clouds drift by. The other villagers who were busy and clever would often laugh at him. "Poor Koji," they would say, "his mind is as empty as a beggar's bowl." One day a traveling Zen master passed through the village. The clever villagers all came to him, asking complicated questions about karma and the nature of reality. The master answered them patiently. Later he saw Koji sitting by the river, smiling his simple, vacant smile. The master sat beside him for a long time in complete silence. That evening, the master told his disciples, "Today I met two kinds of people. The villagers whose minds are as full and as noisy as a crowded marketplace, and one man whose mind is as vast, as quiet, and as empty as the blue sky. Tell me, which one is truly wise?" This simple encounter reveals a deep Zen truth. We spend our lives filling our minds, believing that knowledge, cleverness, and complex thoughts are the path to wisdom. We are proud of our full minds, but the story suggests that this very fullness is the source of our turmoil. The villagers, with their busy minds, were constantly striving, worrying, and judging. Koji, the fool, was free. His empty mind was not a lack, it was a state of profound peace. He was not trapped in thought, and so he was able to be fully present with the simple joy of the river and the clouds. The story gently asks us to consider the quality of our own mind. Is it a noisy marketplace, or is there a space for the quiet sky? It teaches us that true wisdom is not about adding more to our minds, but about discovering the peaceful emptiness that is already here when our thinking finally comes to rest. This same peaceful mind, which Koji experienced naturally, is the source from which we see the world. As another story teaches, the world we encounter is often just a reflection of the one we carry inside us. This is the lesson of the two sides of the gate. A young man, his belongings in a small bundle on his back, arrived at the gate of a great city. An old Zen master was sitting there, enjoying the afternoon sun. "Old man," the traveler asked, his voice full of weariness, "what are the people like in this city? I am looking for a new place to call home." The master looked up at him. "What were the people like in the city you just came from?" he asked in return. The young man's face darkened into a scowl. They were terrible, he said. They were selfish, dishonest, and unkind. They were gossips and cheats. That is why I had to leave. I could not bear to be around such people. The master looked at the young man with compassion. I am sorry to tell you, he said, but the people in this city are exactly the same. Hearing this, the traveler sighed, turned around, and continued on his journey without ever entering the city. A few hours later, another traveler, a young woman, came to the same gate. She too asked the master, Good sir, what are the people like in this city? I am hoping to find a place to settle. The master asked her the same question. What were the people like where you came from? The young woman's face lit up with a warm smile. Oh, they were wonderful, she said. They were so kind, generous, and full of good spirit. It broke my heart to leave them, but I must find my own path. The master smiled back at her. You are in luck, he said. The people in this city are exactly the same. This story is a simple but profound mirror. It shows us that we do not see the world as it is. We see the world as we are. The two travelers were not going to find different cities. They were going to create different cities with the quality of their own mind. The first man carried bitterness and suspicion in his heart, so that is what he would find wherever he went. The second woman carried kindness and an open heart, so she would find friendship and warmth. The world is not a fixed objective reality. It is a canvas onto which we project our own inner state. If our mind is full of judgment and fear, the world will appear hostile. If our mind is filled with peace and acceptance, the world will feel like home. This teaching is deeply empowering. It means that the key to changing our experience of the world is not to change the world, but to gently attend to our own heart. This ability to manage our own inner world is the key to handling the challenges that come from others. This brings us to a teaching on how to receive what feels like an attack and transform it into a gift. This is the wisdom of the gift of insults. A great Zen master lived peacefully in a small temple. A man from the village, who was known for his foul temper, did not like the master's calm and serene presence. He would go to the temple every day, stand before the master as he sat in meditation, and hurl insults at him. He would call him a fraud, a fool, a lazy parasite. The master never responded. He just sat in perfect stillness and listened until the man was finished. The master's young disciples were deeply upset by this. Master, how can you tolerate such abuse? They asked. This man is poisoning the atmosphere of our temple. You must banish him, the master replied. Every morning, this man brings me a gift, and every morning I choose not to accept it. But more than that, he is my most valuable teacher. You all bow to me and treat me with respect. How can I learn about my own patience from you? But this man, he comes every day and provides a free and perfect test of my equanimity. He holds up a mirror to my mind and allows me to see if there is any trace of anger or pride left within me. Why would I ever banish my most diligent teacher? This story offers a radical reframing of life's difficulties. Our natural instinct is to see challenges, criticisms, and difficult people as obstacles to our peace. We try to avoid them, push them away, or defeat them. The master's wisdom is to see these very things as opportunities for practice. The insulting man was not an obstacle to the master's peace. He was the very tool the master used to strengthen it. This teaching invites us to shift our perspective. What if the annoying traffic jam is not a problem, but a chance to practice patience? What if the critical comment from a colleague is not an attack, but a chance to observe our own ego's sensitivity? When we can see life's challenges in this way, they lose their power to disturb us. They are no longer problems to be solved, but lessons to be learned. We discover that our peace does not depend on the world being pleasant, but on our ability to meet any and all circumstances with a calm and open heart. This ability to find a calm heart amidst the noise of the world is a skill we can all cultivate. As our next story shows, the silence we seek is not in a place, but in a way of listening. This is the lesson of the sound of the temple. A pilgrim traveled for many months to a remote mountain monastery. The monastery was famous for one thing, the sound of its great bronze bell, which was said to ring with the sound of the Dharma itself. The pilgrim arrived, weary but full of anticipation, and was granted an audience with the abbot. "Master," he said, "I have come all this way to hear the true sound of your temple. When will the bell be rung?" "The bell rings every evening at sunset," the abbot replied. "But if you want to hear the true sound, you must listen carefully." That evening the pilgrim sat in the courtyard. A monk pulled the great wooden log, and the bell was struck. A deep, magnificent, resonant tone filled the entire valley. It was the most beautiful sound the pilgrim had ever heard. He closed his eyes, savoring every vibration as it washed over him. He felt his mind grow still and clear. Then slowly the sound began to fade, growing softer and softer until it dissolved into nothing. The pilgrim opened his eyes, a little sad that it was over. Just then the abbot, who had been sitting quietly beside him, leaned over and whispered, "Did you hear it?" "Yes, master," the pilgrim said. "It was the most beautiful sound I have ever heard." "No," the abbot said gently. "The sound of the bell is just the sound of the bell. The true sound of this temple is the deep, profound silence into which the bell sound was born and into which it has now dissolved. That silence was here before the bell, and it is here now. That is the sound you came to hear." This story is a beautiful pointer to the nature of our own awareness. We are often fascinated by the bells of our lives, the dramatic experiences, the intense emotions, the powerful thoughts. We chase after these experiences and we mourn them when they fade. But the Master's teaching directs our attention to something deeper. The real truth, our true nature, is not the temporary sounds and experiences that come and go. It is the vast, silent, and unchanging awareness in which all of those experiences happen. This awareness is like the silence of the temple. It is always present, whether the bell is ringing or not. The practice of meditation is the practice of learning to listen to this silence, to rest in this background of pure awareness. When we can do this, the coming and going of life's experiences no longer disturb us in the same way. We realize that we are not the fleeting sound of the bell, but the eternal silence that holds it. This ability to hold life's events without judgment is a rare skill, as our next story reveals. It is a timeless Taoist parable that has become a cornerstone of Zen, teaching us the folly of labeling our experiences as good or bad. This is the story of the farmer's luck. There was an old farmer who had worked his fields for many years. One day his horse, his most prized possession, ran away. Upon hearing the news, his neighbors came to visit. "Such bad luck," they said sympathetically. The farmer replied, "Maybe." The next morning the horse returned, bringing with it 3 other wild horses. "How wonderful!" the neighbors exclaimed. "Such good luck," the farmer replied. "Maybe." The following day his son tried to tame one of the wild horses, was thrown and broke his leg. The neighbors again came to offer their sympathy. "What a terrible misfortune," they said. "Such bad luck," the farmer replied. "Maybe." The day after, military officials came to the village to draft all the young men into the army for a war. They saw the farmer's son with his broken leg and passed him by. The neighbors congratulated the farmer on his good fortune. "Your son was spared. Such incredible luck." The farmer replied, "Maybe." This simple story is a profound teaching on the nature of reality and the limits of our own judgment. We are constantly labeling the events of our lives as good or bad. A promotion is good, a sickness is bad, Finding a partner is good, a breakup is bad. But the farmer's wisdom shows that we see only a tiny fragment of a much larger, interconnected pattern. We have no idea what the long-term consequences of any event will be. What seems like a disaster today might be the seed of a great blessing tomorrow. What seems like a great victory might lead to an unforeseen difficulty. The farmer's response, maybe, is not one of indifference. It is an expression of deep wisdom and humility. It is the practice of withholding judgment and accepting the unfolding of life as it is, without imposing our own narrow, short-sighted stories upon it. This practice is a doorway to immense peace. It frees us from the emotional roller coaster of reacting to every event as either a triumph or a tragedy, and allows us to rest in a state of calm, trusting acceptance of the great mysterious flow of life. This freedom from judgment is closely tied to the freedom from our own ego, the heavy identity we carry with us. As our next story shows, this burden is something we choose to pick up. This is the tale of the weight of the self. A proud and famous scholar and a humble, unknown Zen monk were crossing a wide river in a small ferry boat. As they set out, a storm suddenly blew in, and the little boat was tossed about by fierce waves. The scholar, for all his profound knowledge, was terrified. He clung to the sides of the boat, his face pale with fear. The monk, however, sat in perfect stillness, his expression calm and serene. "How can you be so calm?" the scholar shouted over the wind. "We are about to die. All my knowledge, my reputation, my life's work, it is all about to be lost to this storm." The monk looked at the scholar with compassion. "My friend," he said, his voice quiet but clear, "I am in danger of losing very little. I have only these simple robes and this wooden bowl, but you are in danger of losing a great deal. You are carrying your entire library in your head. You are carrying the weight of your reputation on your shoulders. You are carrying the heavy burden of being a great scholar. It is not the storm that makes you heavy. It is what you are carrying that threatens to sink you." This story illuminates the burden of the ego, our self, our collection of achievements, roles, knowledge, and our own self-image can become an incredibly heavy thing to carry through life. Like the scholar, we spend our energy protecting it and fearing its loss. This creates a constant underlying anxiety. The monk, on the other hand, is traveling light. He is not attached to an identity. He is simply present. His peace comes not from having achieved anything, but from having let go of the need to be anyone special. The story is not telling us to abandon knowledge or accomplishment. It is pointing to our attachment. Can we hold our roles and our achievements lightly? Can we know that they are not who we truly are? When we can do this, we find a new kind of freedom and resilience. We discover that when we are not so busy carrying the heavy weight of our own story, we are much better equipped to navigate the inevitable storms of life with a light and peaceful heart. This same lightness of heart can help us find a different kind of perfection, not one of rigidity, but one that embraces the natural flow of life. This brings us to a quiet lesson from a monastery garden, the story of the master's perfection. A young meticulous monk was tasked with preparing the monastery's famous sand and moss garden for a visit from a great lord. The young monk worked for 3 days, with a focus that was a form of meditation in itself. He pulled every single weed, he pruned every branch to perfect form, and then he took a rake and carefully swept every fallen leaf from the vibrant green moss and the pristine white sand. When he was finished, the garden was a picture of absolute, flawless, sterile perfection. Not a single thing was out of place. He stood back, filled with pride, and went to fetch the master. The old Zen master came and looked at the garden in silence. He stood for a long time. The young monk waited for a word of praise. Finally the master said, "It is very clean, but it is not yet alive. You have taken the garden out of the garden. Then the old master walked to a beautiful maple tree that stood at the edge of the sand. He gently took one of its branches and gave it a soft shake. A few dozen red and gold leaves drifted down, scattering themselves randomly across the perfect green moss and the raked white sand. "There," the master said, a gentle smile on his face. "Now it is perfect." This story is a beautiful teaching on the difference between the ego's idea of perfection and the perfection of nature itself. The young monk's vision of perfection was one of control, order, and the elimination of anything spontaneous or out of place. This is often how our own minds work. We want to control our lives, to eliminate all messiness, to have everything in its proper box. But the Master's wisdom shows that true perfection is not sterile. It is alive, dynamic, and it includes the so-called flaws. The scattered leaves did not ruin the garden, they completed it. They brought the touch of autumn, the feeling of impermanence, the signature of nature's own effortless art. The story invites us to soften our own rigid ideas of how things should be. Can we allow for a few fallen leaves in the gardens of our own lives? Can we find the beauty in the unplanned, the spontaneous, the perfectly imperfect flow of the present moment? In this gentle acceptance, we can find a relaxation and a harmony that our striving for control can never provide. This ability to find beauty in what we have, rather than what we lack, is the key to true wealth, a lesson we learn from a master who had nothing, and therefore had everything. This is the famous story of the thief and the moon. The Zen master Raikan lived a simple life in a little hut at the foot of a mountain. He was a hermit who had let go of all worldly possessions. One evening, a thief broke into his hut, assuming a revered master must have some hidden treasures, but he found nothing at all to steal. The hut was completely bare. Raikan, who had been meditating, returned to find the thief ransacking his empty home. "You have come a long way to visit me," Raikan said to the startled thief, "and you must not leave empty-handed. Please, take my clothes as a gift." He took off his own worn robes and gave them to the thief, who was so bewildered that he took them and fled into the night. Raikan sat naked in the moonlight, looking out the door of his empty hut. "Poor man," he thought to himself. "I wish I could have given him this beautiful moon." This story is one of the most beloved in Zen, for it contains the essence of non-attachment and true wealth. The thief operated from a world of objects. He could only see value in things that could be taken and owned. Raikan lived in a different world. His treasures were not things but experiences, the peace of his meditation, the beauty of the moonlit night. These are treasures that cannot be stolen. The master's profound compassion is shown in his pity for the thief. He sees that the thief is the truly poor one, because his mind is so trapped in the world of getting and having that he is completely blind to the real riches that are freely available to him in every moment. Raikan's famous closing thought is a perfect expression of a generous heart. He has nothing, yet he wishes he could give away the most valuable thing he possesses, his own simple, profound appreciation of the present moment. This story gently asks us to consider where we find our own wealth. Is it in what we own, or in our capacity to appreciate? The way we appreciate the world, the flavor we find in our experience, comes directly from our own heart. This brings us to a simple tale of two travelers and the lesson of the taste of the water. Two monks, one known for his joyful and grateful nature, and the other for his bitter and complaining mind, were on a long pilgrimage together. They walked for many hours under a hot sun, and they both grew very thirsty. They finally came to a clear, cool mountain stream. They both knelt down to drink. The joyful monk cupped his hands, drank the water, and then looked up at the sky with a look of pure bliss. "Ah," he sighed, "how wonderful! This water is as sweet and refreshing as the nectar of the gods. We are so fortunate." A moment later, the bitter monk drank from the very same spot. He scowled and spit the water out. "Pa," he grumbled, "this water is bland and tasteless. It is barely wet enough to quench a thirst. This journey is full of nothing but hardship." They had both drunk the same water from the same stream, but they had had two completely different experiences. The water had no inherent taste of its own. Its flavor was created by the cup of the mind that was receiving it. This simple story is a powerful reminder that our experience of life is not determined by the external events, but by our internal attitude. We are always drinking from the stream of the present moment. For some whose minds are filled with gratitude and appreciation, the taste is sweet. For others whose minds are filled with judgment and complaint, the taste is bitter. The stream is the same. The difference is entirely within us. This is a deeply empowering teaching. It means that we don't have to wait for life to give us perfect circumstances in order to be happy. We can choose to cultivate a mind that knows how to find the sweetness in whatever is offered. We can practice gratitude, not as a response to getting what we want, but as a way of being that finds the gift in every moment. As you rest here, can you feel the simple water of your own breath flowing in and out? Can you, just for this moment, choose to receive it as a sweet and precious gift? This preciousness of the present moment, the only moment we ever truly have, is the theme of our next story. It is a teaching about the illusion of later and the wisdom of living fully right now. This is the story of the last drop of water. A master and his student were traveling through a dry, barren land. They had been walking for many days, and their water supply had dwindled to a single small cupful. The sun was hot, and they were both deeply thirsty. The student looked at the last bit of water. "Master," he said, "we must save this. We must be prudent. Let us wait until we are truly desperate, until we absolutely cannot go on, and then we will drink it." The master took the small cup from the student's hand. He did not speak. He simply stood there for a moment. He felt the heat of the sun on his skin. He felt the dryness in his own throat. He felt the simple, profound reality of his own thirst in that moment. Then, with complete presence and a look of deep gratitude, he slowly drank the entire cup of water. The student was horrified. "Master, what have you done? You have drunk our last hope. What will we do now when we are truly thirsty later?" The master wiped his lips and smiled a peaceful smile. "Later is a ghost," he said. "The only thirst that is real is the thirst of now, and the only water that is real is the water of now. To be fully alive for this one drink, to receive it completely, is to have drunk from the entire river of life. Now, let us walk on." That simple, profound act of drinking the last drop of water, of choosing the reality of now over the fear of later, teaches us that our entire life is contained within this single moment. This same wisdom which finds fullness in the present can also help us see the gifts hidden in our greatest challenges. This brings us to a story about a man who found his greatest strength not by avoiding a monster, but by turning to face it. This is the tale of the tiger and the strawberry. A monk was walking through a forest when he came upon a fierce man-eating tiger. He turned and fled, the tiger chasing close behind him. He ran as fast as he could until he came to the edge of a great cliff. With nowhere else to go, he grabbed onto a thick vine hanging from the cliff top and swung himself down over the edge. As he hung there, suspended between the tiger above and the jagged rocks far below, he looked down and saw, to his horror, another tiger on the ground, looking up at him and licking its chops. His situation was impossible. Then he noticed two small mice, one white and one black, nibbling at the vine he was clinging to. He knew that soon the vine would break. He looked around in a state of complete and utter despair, and then he saw it. Growing from a small crevice in the cliff face, just within his reach, was a single wild strawberry, glowing red in the sunlight. He looked at the tiger above, he looked at the tiger below, He looked at the mice gnawing on his vine. Then he looked at the strawberry. He reached out his free hand, plucked it, put it in his mouth, and savored it. It was the most delicious thing he had ever tasted. This famous Zen story is a powerful metaphor for our human condition. The tiger above is the past, with all its regrets and memories, always chasing us. The tiger below is the future, with all its fears and uncertainties, always waiting for us. The vine is our life, and the two mice, one white for day and one black for night, are time relentlessly nibbling away at our existence. This is our situation, and what do? We spend most of our time looking up at the tiger of the past or down at the tiger of the future, completely consumed by our predicament. The profound teaching of the story is in the monk's final action. In the midst of this impossible situation, he finds a moment of pure, unadulterated presence. The strawberry represents the simple sensory reality of the present moment. It is always here, always available, offering its sweetness, even in the midst of our greatest difficulties. The story is not about ignoring our problems. It is about remembering that even when life feels impossible, the opportunity to be fully alive, to taste the sweetness of this one single moment, is never taken from us. This same ability to find grace in the present, no matter the circumstances, is the key to a peaceful mind, as our next story shows. It is a lesson in how our own thinking creates the cage that imprisons us. This is the story of the monkey mind trap. A Zen master was teaching a group of young monks to illustrate a point. He brought out a small trap made from a coconut shell, with a hole just big enough for a monkey's hand to fit through. Inside the coconut, he placed a sweet rice cake. He then tied the coconut to a tree. "Soon a monkey will come," he said. "Watch what happens." A monkey, smelling the sweet treat, came down from the trees. It slipped its hand through the hole and grasped the rice cake. But when it tried to pull its hand out, the hole was too small for its clenched fist to pass through. It pulled and pulled, chattering in frustration and fear, but it could not get free. It was trapped. You see, the master said to his students, the trap is not holding the monkey is holding the trap. All it has to do to be free is to let go of the rice cake, but its own desire is so strong, it would rather be captured than release the very thing that is imprisoning it. This simple story is a direct and powerful metaphor for our own minds. The rice cake represents anything we cling to: an old resentment, a worry about the future, a cherished opinion about ourselves, a desire for things to be different than they are. Our minds grasp onto these thoughts and desires, and then we feel trapped. We struggle, we feel anxiety, we feel stuck, not realizing that we are holding on to the very thing that is causing our suffering. The trap is not the external situation, it is our own mental clenching. Freedom, the master shows, is always just one thought away, the thought of letting go. The practice of meditation is the practice of learning to gently open the fist of the mind. We notice what we are clinging to, the story, the grievance, the desire, and we practice again and again, simply letting it be, releasing our grip. It is in this simple, repeated act of letting go that we find our freedom. This same freedom is found not only in what we release, but in what we choose to see, as our next story illustrates. The world we experience is often a direct reflection of the questions we ask. This is the tale of the Master's Garden. A new student arrived at a monastery, full of earnest ambition. He found the old Zen master sitting quietly in a garden that seemed to the student to be a complete mess. Weeds were growing up between the beautiful flowers, and dead leaves lay scattered on the moss. "Master," the student said, eager to show his diligence, "this garden is full of weeds and decay. Allow me to clean it for you, to make it perfect." The master looked at him with a gentle smile. "Before you do that," he said, "first go into the garden and find me a single weed." The student was puzzled, but he bowed and went into the garden. He looked down, and he saw hundreds of weeds. He reached for a large, ugly thistle, but as he looked closer, he saw a tiny, iridescent beetle crawling on its leaf. He saw the intricate, thorny beauty of its flower. He saw how its deep roots were breaking up the hard soil, allowing air to enter. He realized that this weed was a vital part of the garden's life. He moved on. He saw a patch of clover. A weed, he thought. But then he saw a honeybee gathering nectar from its small white flowers. He saw a dandelion, and he remembered how the cook used its bitter leaves in their spring salads. He spent the entire afternoon in the garden, and he could not find a single plant that was not, in its own way, beautiful, useful, and a necessary part of the whole. He returned to the master, his hands empty. "Master," he said, his voice full of a new humility, "I have looked all afternoon, and I could not find a single weed in your garden." The master's smile deepened. "And so," he said, "you have just cleaned the garden perfectly." This story is a profound teaching on the nature of judgment. A weed is not a type of plant. It is a judgment we project onto a plant. It is a label that comes from our own limited human idea of how a garden should be. The student's task was not to change the garden, but to change his own mind. When he let go of his judgments, the weeds disappeared. He did not remove a single plant, but the garden was transformed. This is a lesson for how we view our own lives and our own minds. We are constantly labeling our experiences and our thoughts as weeds, our anxiety, our sadness, our distractions. We spend our energy trying to pull them out, to get rid of them. But what if we were to look at them with the same gentle curiosity as the student? What if we were to see how even our most difficult emotions have a role to play, a message to deliver, a way of being a necessary part of the whole, complex garden of our being? When we stop fighting with the weeds in our mind and instead learn to see them with acceptance, our inner garden becomes a place of peace, not a battlefield. This peace, which comes from a non-judgmental heart, is the foundation for all true understanding. A truth we discover in a story about a man who believed his knowledge was a fortress. This is the tale of the River of Words, a very learned scholar who had memorized thousands of pages of Buddhist philosophy, came to challenge a simple Zen master who lived by a river. "I have mastered the Diamond Sutra, the Heart Sutra, and the Lotus Sutra," the scholar declared. "My understanding is as vast and deep as a great ocean. What can you possibly teach me?" The master did not speak. He simply picked up a bucket, filled it with water from the river, and handed it to the scholar. "What is this?" the master asked. "It is a bucket of water," the scholar replied, annoyed by the childish question. "No," the master said, "this is not the river. This is just a few words about the river. You have spent your life collecting buckets of words, descriptions and ideas about the truth, but you have never actually put your hands in the water." The master then gently took the scholar's hand and led him to the river's edge. He guided the scholar's hand down into the cool, flowing current. The scholar felt the undeniable reality of the water, its coolness, its movement, its power. It was a truth that was alive, direct, and beyond any words he had ever read. In that moment, he realized that all his knowledge was like a beautiful, intricate map of a place he had never actually visited. This story illustrates the critical Zen distinction between conceptual knowledge and direct experience. The scholar's mind was full of buckets of water. He had an immense collection of ideas about the truth, but these ideas had become a barrier, preventing him from having a direct, living encounter with reality itself. We all do this. We read books about love instead of being loving. We analyze happiness instead of allowing ourselves to be happy. We study meditation instead of simply being present. The master's lesson is a call to move beyond the map and into the territory. It is an invitation to put down our buckets of concepts and to have the courage to touch the river of life directly with our full sensory awareness. As you lie here, you are not thinking about your breath, you are feeling your breath. This is the river. This is the truth that needs no words. This same truth, which is found beyond words, is often revealed not when we are strong, but when we are most vulnerable. This brings us to a quiet story about a warrior who found his greatest teacher in the one thing he could not conquer. This is the lesson of the samurai's sickness. There was a great samurai warrior named Kenshin, whose will was as strong as the steel of his sword. He had never been defeated in battle, and he prided himself on his discipline and his ability to endure any hardship without complaint. He saw his body as a tool, an instrument for his will. In his old age, Kenshin fell gravely ill. For the first time in his life, his body would not obey him. He was racked with pain and weakness. He fought the sickness as if it were an enemy army. He used his immense willpower to try and force his body to be well. He grew angry and frustrated at its betrayal. His mind, which had always been his greatest weapon, was now his greatest tormentor. A Zen monk came to visit him. Kenshin, lying on his mat, weak and frail, spoke with rage. "I have conquered every enemy on the battlefield," he rasped, "but I cannot defeat this enemy within my own body. I have failed." The monk sat beside him and gently took his hand. "Great warrior," he said softly, "you have spent your life fighting, but this sickness is not an enemy to be defeated. It is a teacher. It has come to teach you the one lesson your great strength could never teach you, the wisdom of surrender. Your body is not your servant to command. It is a part of this great earth. It has its own seasons, its own wisdom. Stop fighting it. Listen to it. Let it be your teacher." Kenshin, for the first time, stopped fighting. He let go of his will. He simply listened to his body. He felt the pain not as an enemy, but just as a sensation. He felt his weakness not as a failure, but just as a reality. In this deep surrender, a profound peace that he had never known in all his years of victory washed over him. He realized that true strength was not in the will to conquer, but in the courage to yield to what is. This story is a powerful teaching for all of us who struggle with our physical bodies or with difficult emotional states. Our instinct is to fight, to resist what we are feeling. We treat pain, sickness, or sadness as an invading enemy, but the monk's wisdom offers a different path. What if these difficult experiences are not problems to be solved, but teachers to be listened to? What if our pain has a message for us? What if our fatigue is a wise call to rest? When we can stop fighting with our own experience and instead turn toward it with a gentle, listening curiosity, we can find a deep peace even in the midst of great difficulty. We learn that we are not our bodies, and we are not our pain. We are the quiet, spacious awareness that can hold all of it with a gentle and loving embrace. This same gentle embrace is the key to all true learning, as our next story shows. It is a tale about a master who taught his most important lesson not by giving an answer, but by creating a space for discovery. This is the story of the master's silence. A young monk was plagued by a deep and persistent question about the nature of the self. He went to his master, a renowned teacher who was famous for his eloquent Dharma talks. "Master," he said, "I have read all the texts, and they say my true self is not my thoughts and not my body. Please, tell me, what is my true self?" The master looked at him, his eyes full of a deep, knowing silence. He did not speak. He simply picked up a brush, dipped it in ink, and on a piece of white paper he drew a perfect circle, an enso. He then pushed the paper across the table to the student. The student stared at the circle. It was beautiful, but it was not an answer. It was just a shape. He waited. The master remained silent. The student grew frustrated. "Master, please, I need an answer. My mind is in torment." "A circle is not an answer." The master finally spoke, his voice as quiet as the ink on the paper. "I cannot give you the answer," he said, "because my answer would just be another thought in your head. The truth is not a thought. It is an experience. I have not given you an answer. I have given you a mirror. Sit with this circle. Look at it. But more importantly, look at the one who is looking. The answer you are seeking is not in the circle. It is in the silence from which you are looking at it." This profound encounter reveals the heart of Zen pedagogy. A true teacher knows that wisdom cannot be transmitted as information. It cannot be given from one person to another. It can only be realized. The student was seeking another concept to add to his collection. The master wisely refused to give him one. The circle, the enso, is a classic Zen symbol. It represents wholeness, emptiness, and the universe. But its true function as a teaching tool is not in its symbolism. It is a non-verbal pointer. It is designed to stop the thinking mind. You cannot figure out a circle. You can only experience it. The master's real instruction was to look at the one who is looking. He was pointing the student's attention away from the object of his search, the self, and back toward the subject, the silent, witnessing awareness that was present before the question was ever asked. This is the ultimate answer that can never be spoken, only discovered. Just as the student had to discover the truth for himself, another famous master once taught that the responsibility for our own state of mind is entirely our own. This brings us to a story about a man who blamed the world for his problems and the simple truth that set him free. This is the tale of the leather on the ground. A king in ancient times was a very sensitive and irritable man. He complained constantly that the ground was too rough for his tender feet. Walking anywhere was an ordeal of pain and complaint. One day, in a fit of frustration, he made a royal decree: "I command that the entire ground of my kingdom be covered with leather. No one shall suffer from this rough earth again." His ministers were thrown into a state of panic. It would be an impossible task. It would take all the cows in the kingdom, all the money in the treasury. It would be a catastrophe. An old Zen sage, who served as a quiet advisor at the court, heard of the king's decree. He went to the king. He did not argue or tell the king he was being foolish. He simply bowed and said, "Your Majesty, I have a much simpler solution that will achieve the same result with far less effort." "What is it?" the king demanded impatiently. The sage reached into his bag and pulled out two small shaped pieces of leather with straps. Instead of trying to cover the whole earth in leather, he said gently, "Why not just cover your own 2 feet?" The king stared at the simple sandals, and in that moment he understood. He had been trying to change the entire world to suit his own sensitivity. The real problem was not the roughness of the ground, but the tenderness of his own feet. He had been looking for an external solution to an internal problem. This story is a simple but powerful parable for how we approach our own suffering. We are often like the king. We complain about the world. Other people are difficult. Our job is stressful. Life is unfair. We believe that if we could just change the external circumstances, if other people would just behave, if our situation were different, then we would find peace. We are trying to cover the whole world in leather. The sage's wisdom is the essence of the Buddhist path. It is the realization that the source of our suffering and its solution lies not in the world outside, but within our own minds. Instead of trying to change the world, we can learn to change our own mind. We can learn to cover our own feet with the leather of mindfulness, of compassion, of wisdom. When we do this, we find that we can walk on any ground, no matter how rough, with a sense of balance and peace. This peace which comes from within is our greatest strength. a truth we discover in a story about a man who believed his power lay in his voice. This is the lesson of the general's roar. There was a great general who was famous for his terrifying battle cry. It was said that his roar was so powerful it could stop an enemy army in its tracks and make the bravest soldier's heart tremble with fear. He relied on this power. It was the core of his identity. One day he went to a Zen master to boast of his power. "Master," he said, "my voice is my greatest weapon. It is the source of all my victories." The master, who was a small, quiet man, said, "Your roar is indeed very impressive. But may I ask, what do you sound like when you are not roaring?" The general was taken aback. "What do you mean? I am always the general. I am always ready to roar." "Let us try an experiment," the master said. "I want you to sit here with me, and for the next hour we will do nothing. We will not roar. We will just be silent." The general, though he thought it was a foolish waste of time, agreed. At first he was restless and agitated. The silence felt like a weakness. But as the minutes passed, a strange thing happened. In the absence of his own roar, he began to hear other things for the first time. The gentle sound of the wind, the distant song of a bird, the quiet, steady rhythm of his own breathing. A deep, profound stillness that he had never known began to rise within him. After the hour was over, his face was transformed. "Master," he whispered, his voice soft and full of wonder, "I see now. My roar was a great noise that made me deaf to the quietness. I thought my power was in my shouting, but I see now that the true power is in this silence." This story teaches us about the difference between outer expressive power and inner receptive power. The general is a symbol of our own ego, which is often loud, aggressive, and constantly trying to assert itself. We think our strength lies in our opinions, our arguments, our ability to impose our will. But the master's lesson is that there is a much greater power to be found in silence, in stillness, in simply listening. The general's roar was a mask that hid his own vulnerability. In the silence, he discovered a strength that did not need to be proven, a peace that was not dependent on being heard. This story invites us to notice the roaring in our own lives, the constant mental chatter, the need to be right, the urge to fill every empty space with noise. What happens when we simply allow ourselves to be silent? In that silence, we can discover a quiet, unshakable presence that is our true and lasting strength. This true strength is not a possession, but a way of being that touches everyone around us. This brings us to a simple tale of a woman who taught a whole village without ever intending to. This is the story of the woman who watered the garden. In a village where people were always busy and stressed, lived an old woman who had a small, beautiful garden in front of her house. She was not a Zen master or a formal teacher. She was just an old woman who loved her flowers. Every morning at sunrise and every evening at sunset, she would perform the same simple ritual. She would take her old clay watering can, fill it at the well, and then with a slow, graceful, and completely absorbed attention, she would water each one of her plants. She did not rush. She did not seem to be thinking of anything else. Her movements were a kind of slow, beautiful dance. The villagers rushing past on their way to the market or the fields would often catch a glimpse of her. At first they paid no mind, but over the years, the image of the old woman and her simple, loving ritual began to seep into the consciousness of the village. When people felt stressed, they would find themselves unconsciously slowing their own pace as they passed her garden. When they were angry, the simple sight of her gentle presence would often soften their hearts. They didn't know why, but her quiet, consistent act of simple, present-moment care was a kind of silent sermon. It taught them more about peace and mindfulness than any lecture could have. She never spoke a word of teaching, but her way of being was a powerful lesson that slowly transformed the entire village, making it a calmer and kinder place. This story beautifully illustrates the power of what is called unconscious teaching. The old woman was not trying to teach anyone. She was not performing for an audience. She was simply embodying a state of peace and presence in her own simple daily life. And that authentic state radiated out from her, touching everyone she came into contact with. This is a profound lesson for all of us. We often think that to help the world we need to do big, important things, but the story shows that the greatest gift we can give to the world is the quality of our own presence. When we can cultivate a little bit of peace in our own hearts, when we can perform our own simple daily tasks with a little more mindfulness and love, that quality of being naturally radiates out. It affects our family, our friends, and our community in ways we may never even know. We teach not by what we say, but by who we are. This simple embodied presence is the theme of our next story for this journey. It is a tale that asks the most fundamental of all questions and finds the answer not in a grand philosophy, but in a simple, everyday act. This is the story of the master and the taste of Zen. A young, eager student, after years of study, finally had the courage to ask his master the ultimate question. "Master," he said, "I have studied for so long. Please tell me in one word, what is the true taste of Zen?" The master was old and his health was failing. He was lying on his simple mat, too weak to get up. He looked at the student, and a faint smile touched his lips. He did not speak. Instead, he slowly and with some difficulty raised one frail finger and pointed to a cup of water that was sitting just beyond his own reach. The student, thinking this was a test, immediately tried to find a deep symbolic meaning. Was the master pointing to the emptiness of the cup, the formlessness of the water? He began to expound on these philosophical ideas. The master just shook his head weakly, a look of gentle exasperation in his eyes. He pointed again, more insistently, to the cup. Suddenly the student understood. It was not a philosophical riddle. It was a simple human request. He stopped thinking. He got the cup, and with great care, he gently held it to his master's lips, helping the old man to take a small, grateful sip. The master drank, and then he lay back, a look of profound peace on his face. He looked at the student, and with his last breath he whispered, This profound and moving story is the culmination of all these teachings." The student, like all of us, was looking for a concept, an idea, a grand answer to the question, what is Zen? The master, in his final moments, gave him the only true answer. Zen is not an idea. It is not a philosophy. It is the simple, direct, compassionate, and fully present act of giving a thirsty person a drink of water. It is found not in our heads, but in our hearts and in our hands. It is the taste of reality itself, met with a simple and loving response. The entire path, all the books, all the meditation, leads to this, the ability to be fully present for this one simple, sacred moment, and to respond with whatever kindness is needed. That simple final act, offering a cup of water, reveals that the essence of wisdom is not a grand idea, but a simple, compassionate response. This same practical truth is sometimes learned not through gentleness, but through a sudden, shocking awakening. This brings us to a story about a monk who believed his understanding was complete, and the abrupt lesson that showed him otherwise. This is the tale of the sound of the broken tile. A monk named Kyogen had spent years studying the Zen koan. What was your original face before your parents were born? He had filled his mind with all the philosophical commentaries, and had debated it endlessly, but he could not find a living answer. Frustrated, he burned all his scholarly notes and became a simple caretaker at a remote, abandoned monastery. He told himself, "I am not worthy of the Dharma. I will spend my life simply sweeping the grounds." One day, as he was carefully sweeping the mossy stones, His broom caught a small, loose piece of roof tile. The tile flew through the air and struck a tall stalk of bamboo that was growing nearby. It made a single, sharp, clear clack. The sound pierced Kyogen to the core. In that one unexpected instant, his years of intellectual struggle fell away. The question and the answer, the seeker and the sought, the mind and the world, all dissolved. He stood there, broom in hand, and began to laugh, tears streaming down his face. The sound of the broken tile hitting the bamboo was the sound of his own original face. It was a truth so simple, so direct, and so obvious that his clever, striving mind had completely missed it. This story is a classic Zen account of sudden enlightenment, or satori. It shows that insight does not always come from quiet meditation or deep study. Sometimes it comes like a flash of lightning from a simple, unexpected sensory experience. Kyogen had been trying to think his way to an answer that was beyond thought. He had been looking for a concept, but the truth is not a concept. It is a direct, unmediated experience of reality. The sound of the tile was not symbolic. It was simply a sound, pure and unadorned. And in that moment of pure, choiceless hearing, Kyogen's mind for an instant stopped thinking. In that gap, the truth revealed itself. The story teaches us that our constant mental effort, our very striving for enlightenment, can be the primary obstacle. It is often only when we have given up, when we have surrendered our struggle, that the answer we were seeking can finally find us, not in a grand idea, but in the simple, ordinary reality of a single sound. This same simple reality, which is always available to us, is often missed because we are too busy judging our experience. This brings us to a quiet tale of a master who taught his most profound lesson not by what he said, but by what he did not say. This is the story of the master's unjudging ear. A young monk in a monastery was deeply troubled by a recurring disturbing thought that he considered to be impure and unworthy of a practitioner. He struggled with it constantly, feeling a deep sense of shame and failure every time it arose in his mind. He believed he was a terrible monk. Finally, he gathered the courage to go to the old Zen master for a private interview. With his head bowed in shame, he confessed. "Master," he whispered, "I am plagued by a terrible thought. It is so impure, I fight it. I try to push it away, but it keeps returning. I am not worthy to be here." The old master listened. He did not ask what the thought was. He did not offer any advice on how to get rid of it. He did not tell the monk he was good or bad. He simply sat there, his presence a vast and silent ocean of acceptance. After a long, quiet moment, he leaned forward and whispered, as if sharing a secret, "Don't worry, I have those thoughts too." In that one simple human admission, the young monk's entire world shifted. The shame he had been carrying for so long, the heavy burden of his own self-judgment, simply dissolved. He realized that the problem was not the thought itself, but the story he had built around it, the story of his own unworthiness. The master's confession was a gift of profound compassion. It showed him that he was not alone, that being human includes the full spectrum of thoughts, and that true practice is not about achieving some state of perfect purity, but about learning to hold our own complex, messy, and beautiful humanity with an unconditional, loving acceptance. This story is a deep teaching on the nature of self-judgment. We are often our own harshest critics. We have an idea of who we should be, and when our actual experience doesn't match that ideal, we condemn ourselves. The young monk's suffering came not from his thought, but from his judgment of the thought. The master's incredible wisdom was to meet this judgment, not with a technique, but with simple shared humanity. He did not offer a solution to the problem, because he knew the real problem was the belief that it was a problem in the first place. This is the heart of radical acceptance. It is the practice of allowing our inner experience to be exactly what it is, without the extra layer of judgment and resistance. As you rest here, you may notice thoughts or feelings that you have labeled as unwanted or bad. Can you, just for this moment, meet them with the same gentle acceptance as the Master? Can you whisper to yourself, "It's okay, this is just a part of being human"? In that simple act of non-judgment, a deep and healing peace can be found. This same deep peace is often found not by adding anything to our lives, but by recognizing what is already here. This brings us to a famous story about a man who searched the world for a treasure he already possessed. This is the tale of the diamond on the forehead. There is an ancient Buddhist parable about a very poor man who had a dear friend who was very wealthy. One day the poor man was visiting his friend's mansion, and after drinking a great deal of wine, he fell into a deep, drunken sleep. The wealthy friend had to leave on an urgent journey, but before he went, he wanted to help his poor friend, knowing the man's pride would not allow him to accept a gift of money. The friend took a small, priceless diamond and carefully sewed it into the hem of his sleeping friend's ragged robe. When the poor man awoke, he knew nothing of this. He went back to his life of struggle and poverty. He wandered from place to place, looking for work, often going hungry, sleeping in the cold. For years and years he lived in misery, completely unaware that he was carrying a treasure of unimaginable worth with him every single moment. One day he happened to meet his old wealthy friend again. The friend was shocked to see him still in such a poor state. "My dear friend, what have you been doing all these years?" he cried. "I gave you a priceless diamond. I sewed it into your robe so that you would have everything you needed. Why have you not used it?" The man looked down at his worn robe, found the hidden seam, and pulled out the brilliant, flashing diamond. He stood there, speechless, realizing that the solution to all his suffering had been with him all along. This story is the Buddha's own metaphor for our human situation. Each of us, the story teaches, has a priceless diamond sewn into the very fabric of our being. This is our Buddha nature, our innate capacity for wisdom, peace, and unconditional love. It is already here. It is our birthright. But like the poor man, we are completely unaware of it. We spend our lives wandering in a state of spiritual poverty, searching outside of ourselves for the happiness and security that we already possess. We look for it in relationships, in possessions, in achievements, in experiences, never realizing that the ultimate treasure is the silent, aware presence that is the very core of who we are. The spiritual path is not about acquiring a diamond we do not have. It is simply the process of waking up to the one that has been with us from the very beginning. As you rest here tonight, feel the simple aloveness of your own being. This is the diamond. You don't need to search for it. You only need to recognize it. This same recognition, the waking up to what is already true, is often what separates a true master from a mere performer. This brings us to a quiet story of two artists, and a teaching on the nature of true emptiness. This is the tale of the two painters. The king of a great land decided to hold a contest to discover the greatest painter in his kingdom. He summoned two artists, one a renowned native of his own land, and the other a mysterious foreigner from the west. He took them to a great hall, which was divided in the middle by a large curtain. "You will each have one side of this hall," he declared. "Decorate your wall in any way you wish. In 1 month I will return, and the one whose work is the most beautiful will be declared the master." The native painter immediately set to work. He asked for hundreds of rare pigments, the finest brushes, and scaffolding to reach the high walls. For a month, he and his apprentices worked feverishly, painting an incredibly intricate and beautiful mural of celestial beings and mythical landscapes. The foreign painter, on the other hand, asked for only one thing: buckets of water and polishing cloths. He did not paint at all. For the entire month, he and his helpers simply scrubbed and polished their wall over and over until it shone with a perfect, mirror-like finish. The day of the judgment came. The king entered the hall and went first to the native painter's side. He gasped in awe at the breathtaking beauty of the mural, the vibrant colors, the masterful detail. "This is a masterpiece," he declared. "Surely no one can surpass this." Then he ordered the curtain to be drawn back. The foreign painter's wall was completely bare, but it was so perfectly polished that it flawlessly reflected the magnificent mural on the opposite wall. It not only reflected the painting, but it also reflected the king himself, his astonished courtiers, and the light streaming in from the windows. It held everything, yet it was completely empty. The king stood in silence for a long time, and then he bowed. He knew he was in the presence of a true master. This story is a profound Zen metaphor for the nature of the mind. The native painter represents the mind that is full of beautiful concepts, ideas, and spiritual experiences. This can be very impressive, but it is a created beauty. The foreign painter represents the goal of Zen practice, a mind that has been polished to a state of perfect mirror-like clarity. This is the mind of Mushin, or no mind. It does not create anything. It simply reflects reality exactly as it is, without distortion, judgment, or addition. It is empty of its own content, and therefore it has the capacity to hold everything. The story teaches that the ultimate spiritual attainment is not about adding more beautiful images to our minds, but about polishing away the dust and grime of our own concepts, beliefs, and judgments until our mind can become a clear and faithful mirror to the world as it truly is. This clear seeing, which comes from a polished mind, is the key to all skillful action, as our next story demonstrates. It is a tale of a cook who found the way not by looking, but by feeling. This is the story of the emperor's cook. An emperor had a cook who was a master at his craft. His most famous skill was his ability to carve up an ox carcass with a single knife, never needing to sharpen it. He would move through the task in a blur of motion, the knife seeming to dance on its own, and in a few moments the ox would be perfectly jointed, the knife's blade as sharp as the day it was made. The emperor was amazed. "How do you do this?" he asked. "What is your secret?" The cook laid down his knife and replied, "Your Majesty, what I love is the Tao, which is beyond all skill. When I first began to cut up oxen, all I could see was the ox itself. After 3 years I no longer saw the whole ox. I only saw the parts, but now I see nothing with my eyes. My spirit moves where it wants, and I follow my natural intuition. I do not look with my eyes. I feel with my whole being. I sense the empty spaces within the joints, and I guide my blade through those gaps. I never strike a bone or a tough ligament. A good cook changes his knife once a year because he cuts. A mediocre cook changes his knife once a month because he hacks. I have had this knife for 19 years, and its blade is as fine as if it has just come from the whetstone. I simply find the emptiness, and the work does itself." This famous Taoist story, beloved by Zen masters, is a teaching on the state of flow and intuitive wisdom. The cook's journey shows 3 stages of development. First, seeing the whole, the overwhelming, solid problem. Second, seeing the parts, the analytical stage of breaking it down. But the final masterly stage is to transcend seeing altogether and to feel the way through. The empty spaces the cook finds are the path of least resistance. He is not imposing his will on the ox. He is harmonizing with its natural structure. This is a profound metaphor for how we can navigate the complexities of our own lives. We often try to hack our way through our problems with brute force and rigid thinking. But the master cook teaches us to slow down, to quiet the analytical mind, and to develop a deeper intuitive feeling for the situation. It is to learn to sense the empty spaces, the creative possibilities, the gentle openings, the path of least resistance, and to guide our actions through them. When we can act from this place of deep intuitive harmony, our actions become effortless, effective, and we preserve our own energy, our own sharpness for the long journey of life. This same effortless action is born from a mind that is at peace with what is, a mind that has stopped trying to improve upon reality. This brings us to a quiet story of a monk who discovered that the greatest beauty is not the one we create, but the one we allow. This is the tale of the unswept leaves. A young novice was assigned to care for the small temple garden. He was a perfectionist, and he worked tirelessly to make the garden a flawless representation of purity and order. He spent an entire day on his hands and knees, pulling every last weed. Then, with great care, he swept the mossy ground until not a single fallen leaf remained. The garden was immaculate, a perfect picture of human control over nature. He went to the old Zen master, proud of his work. "Master, the garden is ready for your evening walk," he announced. The old master came out and looked at the perfectly clean, sterile garden. He was silent for a long time. Then he shook his head sadly. "It is not ready," he said. He walked to a great maple tree at the edge of the garden, a tree whose leaves had turned a brilliant crimson. He gave its trunk a gentle shake. A shower of beautiful crimson leaves drifted down, scattering themselves randomly across the perfect green moss. "There," the master said, a soft smile on his face. "Now it is ready." This story is a simple but profound teaching on the difference between the rigid perfection of the ego and the living, breathing perfection of nature. The novice, in his desire to create something perfect, had actually removed the life and soul from the garden. He had made it clean, but he had also made it static and unnatural. The master's simple act of shaking the leaves was not about making a mess. It was about reintroducing the element of the wild, the spontaneous, the perfectly imperfect touch of nature. He was teaching that true beauty, true harmony, is not about eliminating all flaws and randomness. It is about creating a space where the planned and the unplanned, the controlled and the wild, can coexist peacefully. This is a powerful lesson for our own lives. We often try to make our lives into a perfectly swept garden. We want to eliminate all messiness, all unpredictability, all fallen leaves. But in doing so, we can create a life that is sterile and lacks a certain vital grace. The Master's wisdom is an invitation to allow for a few scattered leaves in our own hearts and in our own days. This ability to embrace the imperfect, to find peace in what is rather than what should be, is a rare gift, as our next story shows. It is a tale of a man who travelled the world seeking a single moment of quiet, only to find it where he least expected. This is the story of the noisy hermit. A wealthy man, tired of the noise and stress of his city life, decided to dedicate his life to finding a place of perfect silence where he could meditate. He sold all his possessions and began a great journey. He went to a deep forest, but he was disturbed by the chattering of monkeys and the buzzing of insects. He went to a high mountain, but he was annoyed by the howling of the wind. He travelled to a remote island, but the constant crashing of the waves on the shore gave him no peace. After years of searching, he heard of a legendary hermit who was said to live in a state of profound and unbroken silence. He travelled for months to the hermit's cave. As he approached, he was filled with awe. Here, finally, would be perfect quiet. But as he got closer, he heard a terrible noise. It was the sound of dozens of chirping, squawking birds. He found the old hermit sitting peacefully at the mouth of his cave, completely surrounded by a flock of birds who were building their nests in the rocks all around him. "Master," the traveller cried out in dismay, "I came here seeking silence, but this place is noisier than the city I left behind. How can you stand it?" The old hermit looked at him, his face a picture of serenity. "You have been searching for the wrong thing," he said. "You have been seeking a quiet place, hoping it would make your mind quiet. But true silence is not an absence of sound. It is an absence of resistance to sound. I do not fight with the birds. I let their song become a part of my silence. You will never find a quiet place in the world until you have first found the quiet place within your own heart." This story cuts to the very core of our search for peace. We are often like the traveller, believing that if we can just fix our external environment, if we can just get away from the noise, the difficult people, the stressful job, then we will find peace. We are always trying to find a quiet place, but the hermit's wisdom shows that this is a futile search. The world will always be full of noisy birds. The real practice is not to try and escape the noise, but to cultivate an inner silence that can hold all the noise of the world without being disturbed by it. This inner quiet is our own spacious awareness. When we can rest in this awareness, the sounds of the world are no longer a distraction. They become, as the hermit understood, a part of the silence itself. This same deep internal state is the source of all true security, a lesson we learn from a master who faced a great disaster with an even greater peace. This brings us to a tale about what it means to build our house on a foundation that can never be shaken. This is the story of the master's new roof. The Zen master lived in a simple hut that he had built himself at the foot of a mountain. One night, a violent storm with winds of incredible force swept through the valley. The master sat in meditation inside his hut as the storm raged. The wind tore at the walls, and the rain hammered down. Finally, with a great tearing sound, the entire roof of his hut was ripped off and sent flying into the darkness. The master did not move. He simply continued his meditation, now sitting under the open, stormy sky, the rain soaking his robes. The next morning, his students came running from the main monastery, full of concern. They found the master sitting peacefully amidst the wreckage of his home. "Master, are you all right? Your hut is destroyed. Your roof is gone," they cried. The master slowly opened his eyes, a calm and gentle smile on his face. He looked up at the vast, clear blue sky of the morning. "My roof is not gone," he said. "I just have a much bigger one now, and the view is much better." This story is a perfect expression of the enlightened mind, a mind that is completely free from attachment to external conditions. For most of us, our home is our primary source of security. To lose it would be a devastating tragedy. But the master's true home was not the hut made of wood and straw. His true home was the unshakable stillness of his own mind. Because he was rooted in this internal refuge, the loss of his physical refuge was not a source of suffering for him. In fact, he was able to see it with a sense of humor and even appreciation. He did not lose a roof. He gained a better view of the sky. This is a profound teaching for all of us. We spend so much of our lives building and protecting our external huts, our careers, our reputations, our possessions. But these things are all, by their nature, impermanent. The storms of life will inevitably come. The only true and lasting refuge is the one we build within through the practice of mindfulness and the cultivation of a peaceful heart. When we are at home in our own being, we can meet any storm with grace. This same grace is what allows us to see the world not as a problem to be solved, but as a reality to be met. This brings us to a simple but deep teaching about the nature of our own responsibility. This is the story of the king and the road. An ancient king was a man who demanded comfort and perfection in all things. He once went for a walk in a remote part of his kingdom, and the rocky, uneven road hurt his feet. He returned to his palace in a rage. "This is unacceptable," he declared to his ministers. "The roads of my kingdom are a disgrace. I hereby command that you cover every road in this entire land with soft, fine leather, so that my feet may never be hurt again." His ministers were aghast. The task was impossible. It would bankrupt the kingdom, but they were too afraid to argue with the powerful king. A wise old court jester, however, heard the command and asked for an audience with the king. "Your Majesty," the jester said with a bow, "your plan is magnificent in its scope, but I have a much simpler idea that will accomplish the exact same result." "Speak," said the king. The jester replied, "Instead of trying to cover the entire earth with leather, why not just cut 2 small pieces of leather to cover your own 2 feet?" The king stood in stunned silence, and then he began to laugh. He had been trying to change the entire world to fit his own sensitivity. The jester in that moment had invented the first pair of shoes and taught the king a profound spiritual lesson. This story is a simple parable for how we approach our own happiness and suffering. We are often like the king. We want the world to be smooth, comfortable, and to never hurt us. We try to control other people, to manage every situation, and to arrange our lives so that we never have to feel discomfort. We are trying to cover the whole world in leather. The jester's wisdom is the essence of the spiritual path. It is the understanding that true peace comes not from changing the world, but from changing ourselves. We cannot control the road of life. It will always have rough and rocky patches, but we can learn to cover our own feet. We can develop the inner resources of resilience, mindfulness, and compassion. When we have these shoes, we can walk on any road with a sense of balance and well-being. This same inner resource is the theme of our next story, a tale that shows how true power lies not in what we can do, but in what we are. It is a story about a man who believed his strength was in his voice, and the silence that taught him otherwise. This is the tale of the Silent General. A great general whose armies had never known defeat came to a Zen master. He was a man of immense power, and his voice was his most famous weapon. It was said his battle cry could make the earth tremble. "Master," he boomed, his voice filling the small tea room, "I have conquered every enemy I have ever faced. My power is absolute. Is there anything left for me to learn?" The master, a small and quiet man, did not seem intimidated. He simply said, "Let us have a contest. We will go to the edge of the great river. You will use your powerful voice to call the ferry boat from the other side, and then I will try." The general agreed, laughing at the foolishness of the old man. They went to the riverbank. The general took a deep breath and let out a roar so mighty that the trees on the far bank seemed to shake. He roared again and again, but the ferryman on the other side simply looked over, shook his head and continued mending his nets. The boat did not move. After the general was hoarse and exhausted, the master simply walked to the water's edge. He did not shout. He did not even speak. He just stood there, his presence radiating a profound and gentle stillness. The ferryman, on the far side, happened to look up. He saw the master standing there. Something in the master's quiet presence, a quality of pure, unassuming need, touched the ferryman's heart. He immediately put down his nets, untied his boat, and began to row across the river. The general stood in humbled silence. His great power, his roar, had accomplished nothing. The master's simple, silent presence had accomplished everything. He had finally met an enemy he could not conquer, the quiet power of a peaceful heart. This story is a beautiful teaching on the difference between the power of the ego and the power of the spirit. The general represents the power of doing, of force, of assertion. This kind of power can be effective in the world, but it has its limits. The master represents the power of being. This is a quiet, receptive power that comes from a mind that is free of ego and desire. He was not trying to make the ferryman come. His simple, authentic presence was an invitation, not a command. The story reminds us that there is a strength in stillness, a power in humility, and an influence in simple, heartfelt presence that shouting and demanding can never achieve. Perhaps in this quiet moment we can notice the roaring in our own lives, the striving, the demanding, the asserting, and simply choose to rest, instead in the quiet, gentle power of our own being. That quiet, gentle power of our own being, which the general discovered in his silence, is not a thing to be acquired, but a space to be realized. This brings us to a story about a young monk who tried to capture the very essence of his mind, only to learn that it cannot be held. This is the tale of the monk who chased the wind. A young monk named Jin was determined to understand the nature of mind. He had read in the sutras that the mind was formless, like the wind. If I can understand the wind, he thought, I can understand the mind. So he went to his master. Master, he said, I wish to go on a retreat to study the wind. The master smiled and handed him an empty silk bag. A fine idea, he said. When you have captured the wind, bring it back to me in this bag. Jin was thrilled. He took the bag and ran to the highest peak of the mountain. He held the bag open, and the wind howled and rushed past it. He could feel its power, but when he closed the bag, it was always empty. He tried for days. He ran through the fields, holding the bag open, but he could not catch the wind. He held it over a steaming fissure in the earth, but he could only catch the warm air for a moment. He grew frustrated and exhausted. Defeated, he returned to the master. I have failed, he said sadly. The wind cannot be caught. The bag is always empty. The master took the empty bag and held it up. You have not failed, he said. You have succeeded perfectly. You have been trying to capture the mind as if it were a thing, but the mind is not the wind itself. It is the vast empty sky through which the wind blows. It is the silent space in which all thoughts, all feelings, all winds of experience arise and pass away. You cannot capture it, because you are it. You have been looking for the one who is looking. This beautiful story is a direct teaching on the nature of our own awareness. We are often like Jin, treating our mind as a problem to be solved or an object to be grasped. We try to catch a peaceful thought or get rid of an anxious one. But this is like trying to catch the wind in a bag. The Master's wisdom points us to a profound shift in identification. True peace is found when we stop identifying with the passing winds of our thoughts and emotions and instead learn to rest as the vast, open and unchanging sky of awareness in which they all occur. As you lie here, you can feel thoughts and sensations blowing through you. You don't need to catch them or fight them. You can simply be the quiet, spacious sky, allowing it all to pass through, untouched and at peace. This same peaceful sky is what allows us to see the world with clarity. But as our next story shows, the world we see is often a direct creation of the mind that is looking. This is the lesson of the two brothers and the mountain. Two brothers decided to climb a great mountain that loomed over their village. The older brother was a man of anxious and complaining temperament. The younger brother was filled with a sense of gratitude and wonder. They walked the same path at the same time. As they climbed, the older brother complained, "The path is too steep. The rocks are sharp and hurt my feet. The sun is too hot, and this wind is a nuisance." He saw every part of the journey as an obstacle, a hardship to be endured. The younger brother, walking just behind him, saw things differently. "Look," he would say, "this steep path has given us such a beautiful view of the valley. These sharp rocks are covered in this lovely resilient moss. The warmth of the sun feels so good on my back, and the wind carries the scent of the pine trees." When they finally reached the summit, the older brother collapsed, exhausted and miserable. "What a terrible journey," he grumbled. It was not worth the effort. The younger brother stood at the peak, his face radiant with joy, looking out at the breathtaking vista. "It was the most beautiful walk of my life," he said. Every single step was a gift. They had climbed the exact same mountain, but they had had two completely different journeys. This story is a simple but powerful reminder that our experience of life is not determined by our external circumstances, but by our internal attitude. The mountain was neutral. It was neither good nor bad. Its qualities were projected onto it by the minds of the two brothers. We are all climbing the mountain of our daily lives. For some, the path seems full of obstacles and hardships. For others, the same path is full of beauty and gifts. The path is the same. The difference is the quality of our attention. The story gently asks us to consider, which brother are we today? Are we focusing on the sharpness of the rocks or the beauty of the moss? We cannot always choose our path, but we can always choose how we walk it. This choice, to see beauty or to see lack, is often driven by our desires. This brings us to a quiet story about a king who longed for a garment that could not be woven. This is the tale of the king's invisible robe. A great king who had everything he could ever want was still not happy. He felt a deep and persistent lack. He summoned a wise old weaver who was said to be a Zen master. "Weave for me a robe," the king commanded, "made from the fabric of pure contentment. If I wear it, I will finally be at peace." The weaver bowed. "I will do as you command, Your Majesty," she said, "but the thread for such a robe is very rare. It can only be spun from moments of true, selfless gratitude, and it can only be seen by a mind that is not grasping." A month later, the weaver returned to the court carrying a large, empty, and beautifully lacquered box. She opened it with great reverence. "Here is your robe," she said. The king looked into the box. He saw nothing. He felt a surge of anger. "This is a trick. The box is empty." "Ah," the weaver said sadly. "Then your mind is still grasping for something to see. You are looking for a robe, so you cannot see the contentment. I am sorry, but you are not yet able to wear it." She closed the box. The king, humbled and intrigued, understood. The robe of contentment was not a thing he could acquire. It was a state of being he had to realize. He dismissed the weaver, but from that day on, he began a new practice, not of getting more, but of appreciating what he already had. He learned to find moments of gratitude for the simple things, the taste of his water, the warmth of the sun, the loyalty of his dog. And one day, as he sat quietly in his garden, he felt a profound sense of peace settle over him, as soft and as light as a silken robe. This story is a beautiful metaphor for our search for happiness. We are all like the king, believing that peace or contentment is a thing we can get from the outside world, a new possession, a different job, a better relationship. We are always looking for the robe. The weaver's wisdom is to show that contentment is not something you can acquire. It is what remains when you stop acquiring. It is the natural state of a mind that is not grasping. The invisible robe is the peace that is always available to us when we can let go of our endless wanting and simply be grateful for the simple, profound gift of this present moment. This simple gift is one we often miss, because we believe our destination is somewhere else. This brings us to a story about a man who searched the world for a place of perfect joy, only to learn he had never left it. This is the island of happiness. There was a young sailor who heard ancient legends of a place called the Island of Happiness, a secret island where there was no suffering, and where joy was as common as the air you breathe. He became obsessed with finding it. He said goodbye to his family and his village, and he set sail on a small, sturdy boat. For 20 years he sailed the world's oceans. He faced terrible storms and saw wondrous sights. He visited crowded, noisy ports and landed on deserted, silent shores. He met wise men and fools, rich kings and poor beggars, but he never found the island of happiness. Finally, old, weary, and with his boat worn and tattered, he sailed back to his home village, feeling like a failure. But as he guided his boat into the familiar harbour, something strange happened. He saw the way the evening light touched the roofs of the small houses. He heard the sound of children laughing on the shore. He smelled the familiar, comforting scent of wood smoke and salt air. He saw the faces of old friends who came to greet him. their eyes filled with love, and in that moment his heart was flooded with a joy so profound and so complete that it took his breath away. He realized that the island of happiness was not a place on a map. It had been here, in his own simple home, waiting for him all along. He had just needed to travel the whole world to finally have the eyes to see it. This story speaks to the very heart of our seeking. We are all, in a way, sailors searching for an island of happiness. We believe it is in the future, in a different place, in a different set of circumstances. We believe that if only I had this, or if only I were there, then I would be happy. This belief is what keeps us sailing, constantly striving, and always feeling that we have not yet arrived. The sailor's great realization is that happiness is not a destination. It is a way of seeing. It is the capacity to be fully present for the simple, ordinary beauty of our own lives, right where we are. The journey is not about finding a new place. It is about finding new eyes. As you rest here, you don't need to sail anywhere. You have already arrived. Can you feel the simple, quiet happiness of this moment? The comfort of your bed, the peace of the darkness, the gentle rhythm of your own breath. This is the island. The peace of this island is often disturbed not by great storms, but by the small stings of daily life. Our next story teaches us how to maintain our own nature, even when the world seems hostile. This is the tale of the master and the angry scorpion. A Zen master was walking with his student along a riverbank. He saw a scorpion that had fallen into the water and was drowning. Without hesitation, the master reached into the water to rescue it. As he lifted the scorpion out, it stung his hand. The master flinched in pain and dropped the creature back into the river. He immediately reached in again to save it, and again the scorpion stung him. He dropped it and reached in a third time. The student, who had been watching in horror, cried out, "Master, are you a fool? That creature keeps stinging you. Why do you continue to try and save it? It is its nature to harm you." The master, gently sucking the venom from his swollen hand, looked at his student with a calm and compassionate smile. "My dear student," he said, "it is the scorpion's nature to sting. That has nothing to do with my nature, which is to save." This simple, powerful story is a profound teaching on the source of our own actions. We often allow our behavior to be dictated by the behavior of others. If someone is kind to us, we are kind in return. If someone is angry or aggressive, we become defensive and angry ourselves. Our own inner state becomes a reaction to the world around us. We are allowing the scorpions of the world to determine our nature. The master demonstrates a different way of being. His actions are not a reaction. They are an expression of his own core values, of his own chosen nature. His compassion is unconditional. It does not depend on the worthiness or the behavior of the one who is suffering. He shows us that we have a choice. We do not have to sting back when we are stung. We can choose to act from our own deepest nature of kindness and compassion, regardless of how the world is treating us in that moment. This is true freedom. This same unconditional heart is what allows us to see the sacred in places others see only sacrilege. This brings us to a story about a cold night, a wooden statue, and a different kind of warmth. This is the story of the beggar and the Buddha statue. One freezing winter night, a homeless beggar, shivering with cold, sought refuge in a large, ornate temple. The temple was empty and dark. Great gilded statues of the Buddha and various bodhisattvas stood on the altar, their faces serene and impassive in the cold moonlight. The beggar had nothing to make a fire with, and he knew he might freeze to death before morning. He looked at the magnificent statues. Then he did something that would be considered a terrible act of sacrilege. He went to the altar, took a smaller wooden statue of the Buddha, and with great reverence, he broke it into pieces and used the wood to build a small, life-giving fire. He warmed his hands and his feet, and he survived the night. In the morning, the head priest of the temple discovered what had happened. He was filled with a righteous fury. He found the beggar huddled by the dying embers and began to beat him, shouting, "You have committed a terrible sin. You have burned the Buddha." Just then, the temple's old Zen master arrived. He stopped the priest. He looked at the shattered remains of the statue and the small pile of warm ash. Then he looked at the beggar whose life had been saved. The master turned to the priest and said, "You have been worshipping a piece of wood for 30 years. This man, in one night, has finally found a Buddha that could give him some warmth. Tell me, which of you truly understands the Dharma?" This story is a powerful Zen challenge to our ideas about what is sacred. We often confuse the symbol with the reality. We worship the statue, the book, the ritual, and we can forget the living heart of the teaching, which is compassion. The priest was attached to the form, the wooden statue. The beggar, in his simple, desperate need, connected with the spirit. The master's wisdom is to see that the true purpose of a Buddha statue is not to be worshipped, but to inspire warmth, compassion, and the relief of suffering. The beggar's act, though it looked like destruction, was in fact a profound expression of the Buddha's own purpose. The story asks us to look at our own spiritual lives. Where are we attached to the outer forms, the rules, the rituals, the concepts, at the expense of simple, direct and living compassion for ourselves and for others? This ability to find the living spirit within the form is also the secret to seeing beauty in what the world might call imperfect. This brings us to a quiet teaching from a tea master, and the lesson of the leaky teacup. There was a great tea master who was known throughout the land for his profound understanding of the way of tea. He had a magnificent collection of rare and beautiful tea bowls, but his favourite, the one he used every day for his own private tea, was a simple rustic bowl that had a tiny hairline crack running down its side. A young, ambitious student who was obsessed with perfection could not understand this. "Master," he said one day, "you have hundreds of perfect, flawless bowls. Why do you choose to use this broken one? It is flawed." The master picked up the bowl and held it in the sunlight. He gently traced the almost invisible line of the crack with his finger. "You see this bowl as broken," he said. "I see it as complete. A new, perfect bowl has no story. It is a promise of what could be, but this bowl, it has lived a life. This line," he said, touching the crack, "is a memory of a time it was dropped and then repaired. It tells the story of its own fragility and its own survival. It is this flaw that gives it its character. It is this imperfection that makes it uniquely beautiful to me. It is more real than your flawless bowls." This story is a beautiful expression of the Japanese aesthetic of wabi-sabi, the art of finding beauty in things that are imperfect, impermanent, and incomplete. Like the student, we are often conditioned to seek a kind of sterile, flawless perfection in our lives. We want the perfect job, the perfect relationship, the perfect self. We see our own cracks, our past mistakes, our scars, our vulnerabilities, as flaws to be hidden. The Master's wisdom is a gentle invitation to see these things differently. Our cracks are not signs of our failure. They are the lines that tell the story of our life. They are the proof that we have lived, that we have been tested, and that we have endured. They are what give us our unique character and depth. To embrace our own imperfections and the imperfections of the world with a gentle and loving heart is to find a beauty that is more profound, more real, and more peaceful than any flawless ideal could ever be. This same wisdom, which finds beauty in the process rather than the perfect outcome, is also the key to all true skill. This brings us to a story about an archer who learned that the secret to hitting the target is to forget the target. This is the teaching of the archer and the breath. A young woman was a gifted archer with a keen eye and a steady hand, but she had one great problem. In practice, she could hit the center of the target almost every time, but in a competition, in front of others, she would become so obsessed with the outcome, so desperate to hit the bullseye, that her hands would tremble, her breath would grow shallow, and her arrows would always fly wide. She went to a Zen master, who was also a legendary archery teacher. "Master," she said, "my desire to win is destroying my skill. How can I overcome this?" The master did not speak of winning or losing. He said, "For the next month you will not shoot at a target. You will shoot your arrows into an empty field, and you will not focus on where the arrow goes. Your only task is to focus on one thing, the feeling of your own breath as you draw the bowstring back. Feel the breath as it fills your lungs. Feel the perfect still moment at the top of the breath just before you release. The target is not out there. The target is your own breath." The young woman was confused, but she trusted the master. For a month she practiced as he instructed. She let go of her obsession with the target and simply poured her entire awareness into the feeling of her breathing. She found a deep, quiet stillness in the simple rhythm of her own body. At the end of the month, the master put a target back up. He said, "Now shoot as you have been practicing. Forget the target. Just find that perfect breath." The archer did as he said. She drew the bow, her mind completely absorbed in the feeling of her breath. She found that still, quiet point, and she released the arrow without any thought of the outcome. It flew in a perfect, graceful arc and struck the exact center of the bullseye. This story is a profound lesson on the nature of process and outcome. We are a culture that is obsessed with results, with hitting the target. This obsession, paradoxically, is often the very thing that prevents us from achieving our goals. It creates tension, anxiety, and self-consciousness. The Master's teaching is to shift our attention from the future goal to the present process. When the archer focused all her attention on the quality of her own breath in the present moment, the perfect outcome arose naturally and effortlessly. This is the secret to mastery in any field. Whether you are writing a report, having a difficult conversation, or trying to calm your own mind, the practice is the same. Let go of the desperate need for a particular result. Instead, bring your full, gentle, and non-judgmental attention to the simple process that is happening right now. In that quiet focus, a natural skill and wisdom can emerge that striving and anxiety will always block. This same distinction between the living process and the dead outcome is explored in our final story for this part of our journey. It is a tale of a monk who was a master of the written word, but a novice in the language of the heart. This is the story of the monk who copied the sutras. In a great monastery, there was a monk whose life's work was calligraphy. He would spend his days in the scriptorium, copying the sacred Buddhist texts. His skill was legendary. His characters were perfectly formed, elegant, and balanced. Pilgrims would come just to look at the sutras he had copied, and they would praise his work as a great act of devotion. The monk himself was very proud of his skill. He felt that by creating these perfect copies, he was preserving and transmitting the Dharma. But as he grew older, a strange emptiness began to gnaw at his heart. He would look at the beautiful, perfect words he had written, words like compassion, wisdom, and emptiness. But he felt no connection to them. They were just beautiful shapes on a page. One afternoon, he looked out the window of the scriptorium. In the courtyard below, he saw an old, illiterate woman who worked in the monastery kitchens. She was sitting with a young novice who was crying because he was homesick. The old woman could not read the sutras. She could not explain the fine points of Dharma. She just sat with the boy and gently stroked his back and listened to his tears. She was not practicing compassion. She was compassion. The calligrapher monk looked down at his own perfect, beautiful copy of the Heart Sutra, and he looked at the old woman and the crying boy. And in that moment he realized that her one simple, unpraised act of kindness was a truer, more living expression of the sutra than all the beautiful, perfect words he had ever copied. He had been so busy creating a perfect image of the teaching that he had forgotten to live it. And so, as we bring our time together to a close for tonight, we are left with this final, quiet truth. The wisdom we seek is not found in the perfect theory, the flawless execution, or the grand gesture. It is found in the simple, the humble, and the real. It is in the taste of a strawberry, the letting go of a rice cake, the grace of a fallen leaf, and the quiet comfort offered to a friend. These stories have been your companions, gentle guides pointing you back to the peace that is your own true nature. They have done their work. You can let them go now, like boats drifting away on a quiet sea. There is nothing left to hold on to, nothing left to understand. Allow the lessons to dissolve, leaving behind only a feeling of gentle stillness. Return now to the most simple and profound teaching of all, the quiet, rhythmic sensation of your own breath. Feel it flow in and flow out. This is the silent sermon, the music that is always playing. It is the anchor that holds you safely in the calm harbour of the present moment. Let each breath be a wave of relaxation, carrying you deeper and deeper into a state of profound and healing rest. The journey is over for tonight. You have arrived. There is nowhere else you need to be. There is nothing else you need to do but to rest. Thank you for sharing this quiet time. Sleep well.